episode 33, and today we're going to cover the year 2006. So, Brett, can you just kind of go over where we last left off?
Yeah, so 2005 was a real down year for both WMF and the Apache Army promotions. WMF, they had lost their main sponsor, Lang Incorporated, so now Mr. Gannosuke is going to have to promote the shows himself with his financial backing, maybe a couple little sponsors, but WMF now has downsized greatly from the prior year or two, and so now they're only going to be able to run Shinkiba or Osaka Delphin Arena, little 300-seat buildings, whereas Apache Army, they also struggled a lot in 2005, but they're kind of getting their feet wet, and now they're going to be able to run Corrigan Hall here more in 2006 than they were in 2005. They're kind of gaining some momentum. They worked with the Riki Choshu promotion for the most of 2005, and now due to Riki Choshu starting back up in New Japan, Apache Army is now going to begin working with New Japan going into 2006.
All right, well, the Apache Army starts off the year on January 4th at the Tokyo Dome, starting their war with New Japan. What took place at this show?
Yeah, so they have Kentaro Kanemura, Gedo, team up with Masato Tanaka, and Tanaka is going to be in place of Kuroda just for name value since they're at the Tokyo Dome, and this is to establish the Apache Army since a lot of New Japan fans might not necessarily know the wrestlers in the Apache Army, as they're going to be regulars going up against the New Japan team of Jushin Liger, Jado, and Gedo. And so in this match, the Apache guys, they would end up setting Liger on a table, and Kanemura would end up coming off the top rope on the outside, sending Liger through the table. Gintaro, who's accompanying the Apache Army, he would end up distracting the referee as Kanemura would end up smashing a piece of the table over the head of Jado, and then Tanaka would end up hitting a diamond dust on Jado, followed by Kanemura hitting a senton to get the win, get the pinfall over Jado, and so the Apache Army strike first against the New Japan CTU team. Again, this is just to kind of establish the Apache Army going forward to show that they are a threat and just to kind of get out there who they are.
So the New Generation Army forms at the end of last year, and now they're going up against the older wrestlers in WMF to start your year on January 20th in Shinkiba. Can you tell us what happened there?
So the main event of January 20th is going to be the New Generation Army, consisting of Soldier, Minio Fujita, and Kenji Sararagi. They're all the wrestlers that have been only in the business for about 5 years or so at the max. They're going up against Mr. Gannosuke, Goemon, so two former FMW veterans, and they're teaming up with Katsuhiko Nakajima, who at this point is only 17 years old. He got started in the business young. Riki Choshu brought him in, and at this point he's now aligned with Kinsuke Sasaki. So he's only 17 years old at the time of this match, so it's kind of like the older guys teaming up with the young boy against kind of the 20-year-olds. So in this match, Nakajima is showing off his hard kicks, so he's laying it in to Fujita and Sararagi, showing what he has. And Minio Fujita, though, in this match, he's really the star of this match. He is showing signs of great improvement. He ends up doing a tope to Gannosuke, and then he ends up delivering a German suplex to Gannosuke, and followed by a 450 Firebird splash. Minio would end up going for a German suplex on Goemon, but Goemon would end up rolling Vegeta with the Gannosuke clutch for the win. So Gannosuke, Nakajima, and Goemon get the win. So to start off the new year, the New Generation Army takes the loss against the veterans.
The Apache then returns to New Japan on January 28th at Corrigan Hall. What they do there?
So the Apache Army, they had 2 days prior on January 26th, they had invaded the New Japan office. So they brought a cameraman in, and they're videotaping them posing in front of the lion logo at the New Japan office, and this sets up January 28th, Kanemura, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, and Gedo against Jushin Liger, Jado, and Gedo. And they rush right away and go after the Apache guys at the start of the match. Kanemura would end up doing a senton on Liger, with Liger kicking out. Jado would then come in and smash Kanemura over the back with a chair, and he ends up doing some really bad chair shots during this match. Kanemura and Gedo would then end up going at it with one another, and Kanemura would end up kicking Gedo low. So then Gedo retaliates and kicks Kanemaru low. And then Kanemaru then ends up kicking Red Shoes, the referee, low as well. And so after that, the referee ends up throwing the match out, so it's ruled a no contest, no winner. Kanemaru would end up challenging Liger to a rematch on February 19th at Sumo Hall at the New Japan Sumo Hall show, and then Kanemaru would end up doing a backstage interview. Talking about the match and everything, when the CTU, Liger, Jado, and Gedo, they end up rushing and attacking the Apache guys backstage. So the feud is kind of starting to get heated. At the Tokyo Dome, it was just a match. The Apache guys won. Now, as the month ends, now it's kind of become a blood feud, and now Liger, Jado, and Gedo, they hate Kanemaru and the Apache guys. So this is now becoming like an actual hated rivalry.
WMF and Apache would both hold shows on February 5th. What happened at each of those shows?
So WMF holds a show on February 5th at the Osaka Delphin Arena, which I talked about last episode, was the home of the Osaka Pro promotion. And WMF was willing to work with them, kind of run Osaka shows every so often. And on this show, the main event is Mr. Gannosuke and Goemon going up against the New Generation Army members of Soldier and Kenji Sararagi. Sararagi, I vaguely talked about last episode. He was a new guy coming through the WMF dojo, so he was a young boy, but he had some good high-flying techniques, and in this match he ends up hitting an Asai moonsault on Soldier, Goemon, Gannosuke, all of them outside the ring. Gannosuke would end up getting Sararagi and hitting a Fire Thunder on him when Hisagatsu Oya, Mr. Gannosuke's old FMW partner, he would end up hitting the ring, and they would do their signature tag team spot of Gannosuke hitting a lariat while Oya would hit a backdrop. And then Goemon would end up hitting a Swanton Bomb on Sararagi for the win. And Gannosuke and Oya challenged the New Generation Army for the next upcoming show in Tokyo on March 3rd. So, again, it's the New Generation Army, the young boys, and they're going up. The whole storyline pretty much is them going up against the old rivals. Hisagatsu Oya was kind of a regular with Osaka Pro at this time, so he was in Osaka. So, it worked out perfectly to set them up to, again, just FMW veterans against the WMF young boys. And then on the same day, the Apache Army would run at the Chiba Blue Field, and they would have a match, Hito versus Miyawaki. The Chiba Blue Field is Kaientai Dojo's home building, and Miyawaki is a Kaientai Dojo wrestler. So during this match, Miyawaki would end up throwing Hito into the ref, and he would end up going for a clothesline with Hito moving out of the way, and Miyawaki would end up hitting the ref. Well, Hito then ends up trying to suplex Miyawaki off the top turnbuckle when Takashi Sasaki enters the ring and attacks Hito with a chair. And so Takashi Sasaki has turned heel here at the beginning of the year. I talked about last episode how he had began working Big Japan regularly. He had challenged for the deathmatch title against Ryuji Ito at the main event at the Yokohama Bunka Gym show. So he's working Big Japan regularly while being an Apache Army contracted wrestler. So the storyline is Takashi Sasaki is going, I'm siding with the Big Japan guys. I don't like the Apache guys. And so he's now kind of the top heel in the Apache Army along with all the Big Japan guys. Miyawaki and Sasaki would end up double teaming until Miyawaki would end up hitting a German suplex on Hito for the win. And then Mama Sasaki and Jotaro would end up making the save afterwards. So again, it's kind of like this Big Japan versus Apache Army feud. And then the main event is Tetsuhiro Kuroda, Mama Sasaki, and Jintaro against Takashi Sasaki, Ryuji Ito, and Daisuke Sekimoto, the Big Japan team. Mama would end up clotheslining Sasaki, and Sekimoto would end up picking up Mammoth and delivering a German suplex. Ryuji Ito would end up going for a dragon splash on Jintaro, but Tetsuhiro Kuroda would end up holding onto his leg, and Mammoth Sasaki would end up hitting a Mammoth home run on Ryuji Ito. Eventually, Takashi Sasaki would end up hitting a D-Geist, and then a clothesline, and then a kick to the head on Jintaro to get the win. And then after the match, Takashi Sasaki would end up calling out Kanemaru, who comes out with a kendo stick, and then so another match ends up getting made, and that's going to be Ryuji Ito, Takashi Sasaki, Daisuke Sekimoto, and Miyawaki, as well as Katsumasa Inoue, who's a big Japan wrestler at the time. They're going to go up against Kentaro Kanemaru, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, Mama Sasaki, High 69, and Saburo Inamatsu, another Kaientai Dojo wrestler. And in this match, Sasaki and Kanemaru, they end up trading elbows with one another. Kanemaru would end up getting a crossface on Sasaki, but Sekimoto ends up coming by and German suplex Kanemaru, and then Mammoth and Inamatsu as well. Sasaki would end up hitting delivering a right kick to the head of Inamatsu and to get the win. And Gedo would end up charging the ring and clearing the ring with a barbed wire bat. So, right now it's going to be the Big Japan side along with Takashi Sasaki as the main heel going up against the Apache Army going forward for 2006.
The Apache Army would continue their feud with New Japan, this time on February 19th at Sumo Hall. How'd that go?
So Apache Army now, they're having two feuds at the moment. So the Takashi Sasaki Big Japan side as well as New Japan. And the CTU guys, which is Liger, Jado, and Gedo. And so in this match at Sumo Hall, they brawl to the outside right away. Kanemaru would end up beginning to stabbing Jado in the forehead, while Liger would end up swinging a chair at Hido's back. Kanemaru would end up beginning to swing a chair at Gedo's injured ribs, while Kuroda would do his entrance hallway lariat on Gedo. The Apache guys would end up working on Gedo's ribs. Liger would end up getting tagged in, but he would be tripped by Kanemaru, who ends up hitting a senton on Liger. Kanemaru would then work on Liger's mask. He starts ripping off Liger's mask, and Liger would end up having to fight back and hitting a clothesline on Kuroda and Gedo to make the hot tag to Jado, who puts Kanemaru in the crossface before Kuroda would end up having to make the save. Liger would end up hitting a shote to Gedo, and Jado would end up hitting a funky super bomb. It does not look pretty, this super bomb off the top rope. Jado would end up putting Kanemaru in a crossface, while Gedo would end up hitting a frog splash on Gedo for the win, and Liger, Jado, and Gedo hug. So this is finally the New Japan side have gotten a win over the Apache Army.
The Apache Army then holds a show on March 1st at Shinkiba, followed by WMF holding a show at Shinkiba on March 3rd. What happens at those shows?
So on the first show on March 1st, the Apache Army hold a show, and again, so the Apache Army, they're feuding with New Japan in New Japan shows, and going for later the bigger Apache Army shows. But for the Shinkiba shows, it's going to be Takashi Sasaki and the Big Japan guys feuding with the Apache Army. So on this show, it's the semi-main event is Kentaro Kanemaru, Dick Togo, and Saburo Inamatsu against Daisuke Sekimoto, Miyawaki, and Katsumasa Inoue. And Sekimoto would end up doing a plancha to the outside, and then he ends up picking up Kanemaru and delivering a Death Valley driver on Kanemaru on the entrance ramp stage at Shinkiba. Sekimoto would end up delivering a German suplex on Inamatsu for the Big Japan win, so the Big Japan guys get the win over the Apache Army in the semi-main event. Well, then the main event is Mama Sasaki Gintaro going up against Takashi Sasaki and Ryuji Ito. Gintaro in a street fight. Gintaro would end up diving over the top, and Sasaki would end up throwing Gintaro into the top turnbuckle and busting him open. So Gintaro is bleeding here. Gintaro and Sasaki start slapping each other. Mammoth would end up hitting an awesome bomb on Takashi Sasaki, followed by Mammoth going for a Mammoth home run on Takashi Sasaki. But Ryuji Ito would come off the top rope with a drop kick on Mammoth to save Sasaki from the Mammoth home run. Gintaro would end up coming in, and he would hit Ryuji Ito with the super kick and then go for the shooting star press on Takashi Sasaki, but he would end up missing, and Sasaki would end up hitting a right leg kick on Gintaro for the win. So the Big Japan guys get the win, and then the Big Japan guys would begin stomping away at Gintaro when Jun Kasai would end up running into the ring to make the save. The Big Japan guys would end up coming would come back and outnumber Junkasai when the entire Apache army with chairs would come out to make the rescue. So Junkasai is back. He had been injured at the end of 2005, and so now he's back, joining along with the Apache army side to go up against the Big Japan wrestlers. And then WMF holds a show on March 3rd, and prior to the show, Mr. Gannosuke would end up announcing that his mom, Kyoko, had passed away right before the show due to ALS. At the time, it wasn't really known that much. It's a lot more commonly known, but at the time, no one really even knew what ALS was. But, so Gannosuke gets the news right before this show starts, and he, again, it's the FMW guys against the New Generation Army. It's as in the main event, it's Mr. Gannosuke, Goemon, and Hisagatsu Oya going up against Soldier, Mineo Fujita, and Black Buffalo. So Oya, like I said, was a Osaka Pro regular at this time, and Black Buffalo, who was a former IWA Japan guy, he was commonly working for Osaka Pro, so it's like the two FMW or two WMF guys along with the Osaka Pro guy. Going up against two WMF guys and a Osaka Pro wrestler. And so in this match, Buffalo and Gannosuke, they would go right at it with one another since they had feuded back in IWA Japan. Gannosuke would end up kicking Soldier low and begin brawling with him, and then end up using a stick on him. And he would end up cutting open Soldier, but slicing up his forehead. Soldier would end up fighting back and spearing Gannosuke and then delivering a lariat. Mineo Fujita would then dive over the top rope outside onto Goemon, and then Hisagatsu Oya would end up grabbing Soldier by the leg, and they would do the Gannosuke lariat Oya backdrop on spot on Soldier, and then Gannosuke would end up hitting Soldier with the Fire Thunder for the win, and afterwards Gannosuke mocks Black Buffalo for his horns around his mask, and they would end up brawling as a result. So the New Generation Army and the WMF guys, the veteran WMF guys, are going to continue to feud. But this was another win for the WMF veterans.
Hustle then holds a show on March 5th at the Yokohama Bunka Gym with Masato Tanaka meeting up with some old rivals. Who were they, and what was the match?
So the Dudley Boys would end up getting brought in by Hustle at this point, and they had that rivalry in ECW in 1998 over the ECW tag team titles. So Masato Tanaka ends up teaming up with Kentaro Kanemaru against the Dudley Boys. So it's like FMW versus ECW in this match. Devon and Kanemaru would end up brawling in the crowd, while Tanaka and Bubba, they would end up brawling on the stage with Bubba suplexing Tanaka. The Dudley Boys would then end up taking the top of a trash can on Kanemaru's crotch and smashing it with a golf club. Bubba would then end up taking turns hitting both Tanaka and Kanemaru with the cane. Tanaka would then end up grabbing a guitar, and he would almost hit Kanemaru with the guitar, but he would instead end up hitting Devon with it. Kanemaru would then end up hitting a senton on Devon, and then Tanaka would end up hitting a frog splash. Tanaka would then try to send Devon through the table, but Bubba would shove Tanaka off the turnbuckle, and then Bubba would then deliver a powerbomb on Masato Tanaka through the table, and then Bubba and Devon would hit the 3D on Kanemaru, and Devon would end up pinning Kanemaru for the win. So this was, the Dudley Boys, they got a big-time offer to come over. They had been let go by WWE the year prior, so they were working TNA and, just taking outside bookings. I believe they had worked All Japan also around this time period. And the one thing is, though, if they were coming to Japan, they weren't doing any jobs. So Hustle made a good deal, and so they got brought in for this show, and they're going to continue to be brought in 2006, and they're mostly going to be squaring up against Tanaka and Kanemaru and the FMW guys.
Tarzan Goto would hold a show in Asakusa on March 5th with several former FMW wrestlers. What happens at the show?
So he would hold a barbed wire board battle royal. And this would consist of several FMW wrestlers: Hisagatsu Oya, Riki Fuji, Goemon, Gasaku. They're all in this match, as well as some of the Goto characters I talked about last episode, his students, and there's a mummy in this match. Well, Goto would end up tossing out the mummy early on, and then Goto would end up hitting a brainbuster on Gasaku into thumbtacks. So, like I said, this is just kind of like this deathmatch battle royal. Gasaku would fight back and throw Tarzan Goto into a ladder, when Goemon would end up rolling up to Gasaku to eliminate him, and then he would end up rolling up Goto. But Goto would end up kicking out and throwing Goemon into the barbed wire, and then hitting a facebuster on Goemon to eliminate him to win the battle royal. And these shows are in a very small little restaurant that Tarzan Goto that Tarzan Goto runs. And so it's kind of like, hey, come to the show, have some dinner, and watch these wrestling matches. And so that was kind of Tarzan Goto's business mentality around this time period. And so he's having, like I said, he's bringing in some of the old FMW guys to have these kind of low-rent death matches with thumbtacks and barbed wire boards.
The Apache Army would continue their feud with CTU at New Japan's show on March 6th at Corrigan Hall. How did that go?
So this was the 34th anniversary show for New Japan, and they typically hold it at Corrigan Hall. So in this match, it's Kentaro Kanemaru, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, and Hito, as well as Jintaro, going up against Jushin Liger, Jado, Gedo, and Black Tiger. And in this match, the Kanemaru team would go after right away at Liger. Liger would end up throwing Kanemaru into a stack of chairs, so they're brawling outside the ring. Liger would end up smashing a chair over Kanemaru's knee. Kuroda would then end up going and hitting a lariat in the crowd on Jado, and Jintaro would end up hitting a shooting star press on Black Tiger, but Black Tiger would end up getting the win, hitting a tombstone on Jintaro for the win, so the New Japan team wins again. This is going to set up for March 19th at Sumo Hall.
So what happened at Sumo Hall?
So it's going to be a rematch of the March 6th match. Kanemaru, Kuroda, Hito, Jintaro going up against Jushin Liger, Jado, Gedo, and Black Tiger. But this match is going to be an elimination match. So the Kanemaru Apache guys are coming to the ring, and they're doing the Team No Respect dance when Jushin Liger would jump them from behind. All the wrestlers are going to end up brawling outside the ring. Liger really focuses on Hito in this match, and he busts him up. So Hito is bleeding. Hito ends up charging at Liger, who ends up moving out of the way, and Hito would end up going over the top rope. So Hito ends up being eliminated. Well, Hito gets really upset by that, and he would end up sending Liger over the top rope to eliminate him, even though he was out of the match. Liger would then end up beating the crap out of Hito and sending him into the chairs. Kuroda would end up eliminating Gedo, and then Black Tiger would end up eliminating Kuroda. And then eventually Kanemaru eliminates Black Tiger with a senton. So this sets up Kanemaru and Jintaro against Jado. Well, Jado would end up getting Kanemaru in a crossface, and he makes him tap out. So now it's just down to Jintaro and Jado. So then Jado ends up throwing Kanemaru out of the ring. Well, Jintaro takes advantage of that, and he ends up kicking Jado low. And Kuroda would then come by and hit Jado over the head with a chair through the ropes. And Jintaro would end up rolling up Jado for the win. So the Apache Army now get the win over New Japan once again, over the CTU guys. And so, like I said, this is getting more and more heated. Especially each time the Apache Army win, the New Japan guys take great offense to that and get really upset. The feud's going to continue. It's going to continue to be Kanemaru, the Apache guys, against Liger, Jado, and Gedo here for the next couple months, with the New Japan guys, willing to job. I mean, only the ones that are really doing the jobs are Jado and Gedo. No one really, like a Liger or anything like that, is really taking any pinfall losses by the Apache guys.
So the Apache Army then on March 19th holds another show later that day at Shinkiba. What happens at that show?
So, the Apache guys have defeated the New Japan at Sumo Hall in the afternoon, and then they hold a show that night. Well, Kanemaru's taking on High 69 in a singles match, and High 69 ends up doing an acai moonsault to the outside on Kanemaru. Well, then Liger, Jado, and Gedo run to the ring and attack Kanemaru, with the rest of the Apache Army having to make the save. Liger ends up so they're brawling and everything, upset that they had lost earlier in the day. Liger outside Shinkiba ends up making a challenge to the Apache Army for their Corrigan Hall show in April. So like I said, the New Japan Apache Army feud is going to continue following month, except now this time it's going to be at an Apache Army show. And then in the main event, it's Jinkasai, Gedo, and Mama Sasaki taking on Takashi Sasaki, Ryuji Ito, and Daisuke Sekimoto in a barbed wire board street fight death match. Gedo would end up tossing Takashi Sasaki into the barbed wire board. Kasai would then do a drop kick on the barbed wire board on Sasaki. Sasaki would end up coming back and throwing the barbed wire board at Jinkasai's head. Kasai would end up kicking Takashi Sasaki low, and then Kasai would end up hitting a Pearl Harbor splash on the barbed wire board on Takashi Sasaki, with Daisuke Sekimoto having to make the save by German suplexing Kasai. Ryuji Ito would then end up hitting a dragon splash on Kasai, but Mama Sasaki would end up making the save by clotheslining Ito. And then Sekimoto would end up hitting a lariat and then finishing off Gedo with a German suplex. So the Big Japan guys would end up getting the win, and then they lay out Jinkasai afterwards. So, Jinkasai, they kind of saw him as a turncoat, like, hey, wait, you were one of us. You were one of the Big Japan guys. What are you doing with the Apache Army? You're not... So they kind of took great offense that Jinkasai was with the Apache Army here. So they're laying him out, and Kanemura and Kuroda would end up having to make the save for Jinkasai. Well, then Takashi Sasaki gets on the mic, and he challenges Jinkasai to a match on April 14th at Corrigan Hall for the upcoming Apache Army show.
Big Japan then holds a show at Corrigan Hall on March 31st. What came from this show having to do with the Apache Army?
So, the semi-main event is Masato Tanaka and Tetsuhiro Kuroda going up against Daisuke Sekimoto and Yoshihito Sasaki. Kuroda would end up going low on Yoshihito Sasaki, but Sasaki would still grab Kuroda and deliver a German suplex to him. Sekimoto would end up doing a deadweight suplex on Tanaka, where he just picks him up with all his weight, Tanaka having no give, and just dropping Tanaka on his head. Tanaka would come back and deliver an elbow smash, followed by a rolling elbow, for the win on Sekimoto. So Tanaka and Kuroda get the win. And then in the main event, it's Abdullah Kobayashi versus Takashi Sasaki, and in a Big Japan Deathmatch heavyweight title match. So and in this match, it's a Kinzen death match. And Kinzens, what they are they're used in Japan for flower arrangement in the container, and so they're these really sharp needles, pretty much, and really spiky. And Kobayashi would end up slamming Sasaki first into them, and then Sasaki would come back and deliver a power bomb to Kobayashi onto the Kinzons. Kobayashi would then end up hitting a reverse Fire Thunder and dropping Sasaki on his head on the Kinzons, with the Kinzons getting stuck in Sasaki's head. So you see, like, it's actually this infamous spot with, or this image with Takashi Sasaki having Kinzon stuck in his head. Kobayashi would then end up delivering an elbow drop on a light tube on Sasaki, but he would end up missing the second time after going for it. Sasaki would then end up hitting a right kick while breaking the light tubes across Abdullah's head, and Sasaki would end up getting the pin and winning the Big Japan Deathmatch heavyweight title. So Big Japan's going all in on Takashi Sasaki here as one of their top guys. They had let him main event Yokohama Bunka Gym show last year, and now they're giving him the title, and that's going to give him even more kind of leeway and more more credibility as he becomes one of the top heels in Apache, that he's now the champion of Big Japan.
Victor Quinones, who's a key contributor to FMW and Wing in the 90s, ends up passing away on April 2nd. What's the details of his death?
So we talked a lot about Victor Quinones in earlier episodes. He was a key contributor to bringing in Mr. Pogo, his heel the heel manager for him, and helping Wing get started. Well, he ends up passing away, and what happened was he had He was found dead after an IWA Puerto Rico show in his bedroom. Due to the stress of running IWA Puerto Rico, it had caused him to drink a lot, and so he was drinking heavily, and he started mixing somas with alcohol, and as a result, he did not wake up on April 2nd. So Quinones ends up passing away. Kanemaru, who loved Quinones, Quinones helped Kanemaru a lot in his early days, helped feed him while he was a part of Wing because he was making so little money. Brought Kanemaru to Florida and Puerto Rico, and as well as the Dominican Republic, where Kanemaru had so little money that he was staying in a dirty hotel, and Kanemaru had told Miguel Perez about where he was staying, and Miguel Perez called Quinones to let him know Kanemaru's staying in a really bad off place, and Quinones ended up getting him set up at this Sheraton, this not really nice hotel after he heard about that. So Quinones had a lot of money and was willing to help out a lot of the boys. And there was actually talk between Kanemaru and Quinones about Kanemaru returning back to Puerto Rico in September 2006 for Quinones' IWA promotion. Obviously, Quinones ended up passing away before that, but Quinones, Kanemaru said, Quinones considered Kanemaru a son to him. He called him my son. So, and there was a relationship with a lot of the boys, especially the wing guys, the headhunters, and all the Puerto Rican guys, Mr. Pogo. A lot of them really respected Quinones. There's a lot of shady stuff that happened with Quinones during his life, but a lot of the guys, like I said, especially the wing guys, really respected and appreciate Quinones for all that he did for them.
The Apache Army then returns to Corrigan Hall for the first time in over 6 months on April 14th. Can you go over the show for us?
So they announced 1,200 fans for this show, and obviously that's a work number. They didn't end up getting exactly 1,200, but it's probably close to that. It's a half-filled building, maybe a little bit more than half-filled. But this is a passionate crowd. This is one of my favorite crowds. I've talked about previous episodes where, the Fuyuki Army show on March 19th, where the crowd was so passionate for Kuroda versus Hashimoto. They're cheering for him so Kuroda so loudly. Well, this show, that passionate crowd is back. But they're more into the booing aspect. They hate the New Japan guys. And they are so pro Apache Army, but they hate the New Japan guys. Such loud booing. So there's a match, Jintaro versus Wataru Inoue, a New Japan junior heavyweight. And Inoue comes to the ring, and he is booed loudly. He ends up getting the win over Jintaro, but this kind of sets the pace of, these New Japan guys are hated. And then Takashi Sasaki would take on Jun Kasai in a barbed wire board ladder death match. They would end up brawling in the crowd, and Sasaki would end up hitting a powerbomb off the stage on Kasai on a ladder. It's a brutal spot. Then they end up getting back in the ring. Sasaki would end up pulling out the Kinzons, but Kasai would end up grabbing Sasaki and suplexing Sasaki on the Kinzons. And then Kasai would end up pulling out some thumbtacks out of a bag, and Sasaki would end up hitting a DDT on Kasai onto the thumbtacks. Kasai would come back with a Pearl Harbor splash on Sasaki on the thumbtacks, and Miyawaki would end up pulling the referee out of the ring to prevent him from making the count. High 69 would end up coming into the ring and looking like he's going to attack Sasaki, save Kasai, help him out, when he would end up shaking hands with Sasaki and attacking Kasai. So High 69 has now joined Takashi Sasaki's group. Sasaki would end up delivering a D-Geist, followed by High 69 doing a trance raver kick to the Kasai's head, and Takashi Sasaki would end up delivering a kick to the head on Jun Kasai to get the win. So, again, Takashi Sasaki's not going to do too many deathmatch jobs here while being the deathmatch heavyweight champion. Well, they're stomping away at Kasai when Jintaro and Mama Sasaki would end up making the save. So, Sasaki's getting more and more heat as they're building him up more as the top heel in Apache. Then it's the semi-main event is Jushin Liger versus Gedo. And there are so many loud boos for Liger here. One woman is even holding up an Apache towel right in Liger's face that he swats away. So, like I said, this is a really passionate crowd. They end up, Liger and Gedo end up brawling outside the ring with Liger hitting Gedo with the chair and then pile driving Gedo onto the floor. Liger would end up busting open Gedo, and Gedo would end up fighting back, grabbing a barbed wire board, and he would end up beginning to choke Liger with the barbed wire board, barbed wire bat. And then Liger would end up getting it from Gedo and hitting Gedo with the barbed wire bat, and again, more loud boos for Liger. Liger would end up delivering a shote and getting the easy win in just about 5 minutes. So Liger has no problem beating Gedo, but Liger ends up he keeps clawing at Gedo's head. So he's not done with Gedo after the last couple months of the Apache CTU feud. So he's now grabbing at Gedo's head, clawing away at him, making him bleed more when Gentaro makes the save, and he hits Liger with a super kick. Gentaro then pulls out some scissors to Gedo, and Gedo begins cutting Liger's hair. And these are loud cheers now from the Apache Army. They are super psyched that Liger is getting embarrassed by the Apache Army. Jado and Gedo end up coming in and attacking Gedo to make the save, and Liger continues beating on Gedo, for the humiliation of cutting his hair. And then Kanemaru and Kuroda would then make the save for Gedo, and Kanemaru would get on the mic and goes, "I want a 6-man match now." The original match was going to be Kanemaru and Kuroda versus Jado and Gedo at the main event of the show. Well, now it's going to be Kanemaru, Kuroda, Gedo going up against Jushin Liger, Jado, and Gedo. And so right away, Gedo ends up tossing Kanemaru into the crowd and attacking him, grabbing a fan's umbrella and hitting Kanemaru with it. Jado and Kuroda, they go into the crowd as well, and they're fighting in the crowd. Kuroda ends up hitting his lariat in the crowd, and again, another loud ovation. They are super pumped. They want the Apache Army so bad. This is like home court advantage in like a basketball game or home field for a football game. This is such a loud, passionate crowd, just wanting the Apache Army to beat New Japan here. Liger would end up beginning to throw chairs at Gedo, and Liger is still just like freaking out about his hair, and he ends up getting in the face of Nikon Lee, the referee, and just like screaming at her because his hair has been cut off. CTU ends up, they all take turns beating on Gedo as the fans are chanting for Gedo loudly. Gedo would end up making the hot tag to Kuroda, and Kuroda would end up going after all the New Japan guys, and again, another brawl outside the ring gets set up with all the wrestlers fighting outside the ring when the CTU guys now, they all take turns choking the Apache, they're all choking the Apache guys, all individually, and then hitting them with chairs. So, the CTU guys are doing kind of what the Apache Army would do to them, using weapons. Liger ends up scratching at Kuroda's forehead and begins covering. So Kuroda's now bleeding, and Liger ends up taking, getting some of Kuroda's blood and covering his whole suit and mask with Kuroda's blood. Kuroda would end up fighting back and finally hitting a lariat on Liger and Jado to make the hot tag to Kanemaru. Kanemaru ends up coming in and hitting a Hurricane Rana and then hitting a spinning powerbomb on Gedo. Kanemaru would then end up putting Gedo in a crossface with Liger coming in and making the save by hitting Kanemaru with the chair. Gedo would then end up hitting Kanemaru with the chair, and but when Gedo hits Kanemaru over the head with the chair, Kanemaru powers up and just gets more motivation to go after Gedo, and he begins elbowing Gedo. Gedo would end up rolling Kanemaru up, though, out of nowhere with a Gedo clutch, but Kanemaru would end up kicking out at 2, and then Gedo would end up kicking Kanemaru low, but Kanemaru would follow that up by kicking Gedo low, and then delivering a Thunderfire powerbomb on Gedo for the win. So the Apache Army defeat the New Japan guys, and the crowd is so happy. There's such a loud pop for the Apache Army getting the win here. Liger would end up leaving. He just begins yelling at a fan, and the fan ends up yelling right back at Liger. And then, so again, the Apache Army have defeated the New Japan guys, CTU group. Takashi Sasaki would then end up coming to the ring, holding up the Big Japan title, and he challenges Kuroda to a match on May 5th. And the Team No Respect, the Apache Army end up doing the Team No Respect dance to end the show. So again, this was a really good show. I wouldn't say this was like a great match, but it's a great match to watch because of just the crowd really makes it. It's like I said, it's kind of like a sporting event because of how much the fans are into this match, how much they want the Apache Army to win and defeat New Japan. And the Apache Army get a big win over New Japan, and the crowd goes home happy in the first Apache Army show in over 6 months.
WMF then holds a show on April 21st and has a death match for their main event in Shinkiba. Can you go over what happened at that show?
So this is, again, the WMF veterans going up against the New Generation Army. Gasaku, I haven't talked about this episode, but last episode he was actually the one that started up the New Generation Army, even though he was by no means a young wrestler. So this match is going to be a barbed wire death match, a no ropes barbed wire death match. Gasaku would end up sending Gannosuke into the barbed wire. And then Soldier and Gasaku would end up sending Goemon into the... Soldier would then set up a light tube and try to suplex Gannosuke onto it. But Gannosuke would end up kicking Soldier low. Gannosuke would then charge at Soldier, who would kick him, and then bulldog Gannosuke through the light tube. So this is the first time Gannosuke is ever having a light tube broken across his body. Gasaku would then end up grabbing a light tube and going after Gannosuke, but Goemon would grab Gasaku, and Gannosuke would end up grabbing a barbed wire bat and hitting the light tube, breaking it across Gasaku's chest. Gannosuke would then end up hitting a lariat on Gasaku to get the win. And so again, the veterans defeat the New Generation Army, and Mineo Fujito afterwards would end up challenging Gannosuke to a tag match at the next show. So it's going to be, again, just continuing the feud. This is all kind of WMF really has at this point. It's just kind of, hey, the veterans going up against the young boys, and the young boys are going to have to lose a bunch before they can prove themselves and actually get a win over the veterans.
A promotion called Ring Soul would debut a character called Hayabusa Sito on April 28th at the Shinjuku face, with Hayabusa accompanying him. Who was Hayabusa Sito and what happened?
That was Masaaki Okimoto, who is best known as Rasei in Michinoku Pro. So he was this mass wrestler who was very talented, great high flyer, but he was very small. And so Ring Soul, which was the startup promotion that didn't last very long, but around this time period there was a lot of those starting up, just companies, promoters feeling like they could, start up and have a financially successful promotion and not really working out. Well, this promotion was willing to bring in Hayabusa. Obviously, Hayabusa can't wrestle, so they end up giving this gimmick to Rasei as Hayabusa Sito. So it's the Hayabusa mask, it's the Hayabusa pants, it's the Hayabusa theme music, and again, Hayabusa's coming to the ring with him. It's a much smaller version of Hayabusa because Okimoto was a very small individual, and so Hayabusa Sito on this show teams up with Yutaka Yoshi and Akira, a New Japan wrestler from the 80s and 90s. They take on Voodoo Mask, Taru, and Toru Owashi. And this match is just kind of a highlight reel, really, for Hayabusa Sito. So he does all the best of Hayabusa moves. He does the Asai Moonsault. He does the Falcon Arrow. He delivers a Firebird Splash on Voodoo Mask. It ends up getting the win. And there was a couple more shows from Ring Soul, but it didn't, like I said, it didn't last very much. It didn't last much longer, and the Hayabusa Sito wrestler would wrestle one more time in All Japan and Hayabusa would come out with him as well one more time in the summer. After that, the gimmick would be dropped, and he would just go back to being Rasei in Michinoku Pro.
A new group called IBF would hold a show on the traditional May 5th using several former FMW wrestlers. What was IBF and what happened at the show?
Off the FMW kind of like nostalgia and bringing it back and having, you know, a traditional group, but obviously couldn't use the FMW name, and so he brings in a bunch of the old FMW wrestlers for this show on May 5th at Shinjuku Face. He would never promote again after this show, so I can't imagine they didn't announce any attendance or anything like that, so I can't imagine it did that well. But this was kind of like the first FMW May 5th show since the 2004 Kawasaki Stadium show. But so on this show, the semi-main event is Mr. Pogo and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga. They're teaming up against Hisagatsu Oya and Riki Fuji. And Pogo and Matsunaga would end up taking turns stabbing Riki Fuji in the forehead, cutting him up. Pogo would end up trying to blow a fireball at Riki, but Oya would end up making the save. Pogo would end up placing a chain around Riki's neck and then trying to choke him out, with the referee DQing Pogo for it because Pogo would not let go. So the Riki Fuji team Riki Fuji and Hisagatsu Oya defeat Pogo and Matsunaga through DQ. And then in the main event, it's Tarzan Goto and Mr. Gannosuke against Masato Tanaka and Gasaku Gashigawara. Tanaka and Goto go at it right away, and they're giving each other headbutts and then Tanaka would end up hitting a rolling elbow on Goto, knocking him down. Goto would end up coming back and knocking Tanaka down, and then Goto would end up setting Tanaka up on a table, and Goto would end up jumping off the apron and splashing Tanaka through the table. Goto would then end up cutting open Gasaku and delivering a facebuster on him on a bunch of chairs, and then to get the win. And then the IBF promoter would end up coming to the ring afterwards with all the wrestlers, and he ends up having a guitar with them, and he ends up singing the same song that Shoshi Arai did at the end of the February 25th, 2000 Corrigan Hall show, with all the wrestlers in the ring. And so, I think this promoter, like I said, just really wanted to recapture FMW, wanted to kind of be Shoshi Arai. Like I said, they would not hold another show afterwards, so this was not considered a success, but it's kind of one of the many attempts to bring back FMW, thinking that, the nostalgia and just all the top names, Pogo, Matsunaga, Goto, Gannosuke, Tanaka, could draw money, and just being having a promotion just coming right from the start, just being like, we're going to be FMW nostalgia, especially led by Tarzan Goto, really just as the top guy, it just didn't work out. And so afterwards, Pogo would end up coming into Tarzan Goto's locker room and challenging Goto, and so Goto and Mr. Pogo are going to start feuding for their respected promotions.
The Apache Army also ran on May 5th at Shinkiba, and then ran shows at Shinkiba on May 17th and June 4th in the building as well. What happened to those?
So Apache Army would also hold a show on May 5th. So this was actually kind of the last May 5th FMW, between the IBF promotion having kind of a nostalgia FMW, a bunch of the FMW guys, and then the Apache Army holding a show on May 5th with Kanemaru, Mammoth, Tetsuhiro Kuroda. Like I said, this was kind of the last ever FMW May 5th, even though they're being held in much smaller buildings than May 5th is usually held at. But that's just kind of where the business is and where the FMW groups kind of are at this point. So for the May 5th show at Apache Army at Shinkiba, and this draws a sellout crowd at Shinkiba, so this does really well in a small environment. In Apache Army, they're doing pretty well at this point. They didn't, like I said, they drew an announced crowd of 1,200 fans, but they're able to run Corrigan Hall more regularly going forward. More money's coming towards Apache Army, and they're starting to grow. The main event of this show is Takashi Sasaki versus Tetsuhiro Kuroda, and they're having a chop battle right away. Eventually, Kuroda would end up getting busted open outside the ring. Sasaki would end up throwing Kuroda shoulder first into the turnbuckle, and Sasaki ends up stepping on Kuroda, and he begins mocking an old lady in the front row who's holding up an Apache flag. who wants to go after Kuroda. So, this is really working as far as Sasaki being a heel and the crowd hating him. When the old lady hates you, you're doing a good job as a heel. Sasaki would end up going for a chair shot, but Kuroda would end up blocking it and then hitting Sasaki in the head with the chair and then rolling Sasaki up with the Samson clutch for the win. So Kuroda gets the win over Takashi Sasaki. Kuroda then asked to shake Takashi Sasaki's hand. And Sasaki acts like he's going to shake it, but then attacks Kuroda along with Miyawaki, and Tomohiko Hashimoto comes out also to join Sasaki on the beatdown, and Kanemaru would end up having to come and make the save for Kuroda, which then leads to May 17th at Shinkiba, where they announce 250 fans, so this show doesn't do as well as the previous show. And the main event is Kentaro Kanemaru, Mama Sasaki, and Jotaro going up against Takashi Sasaki, Daisuke Sekimoto, and Tomohiko Hashimoto. Like I said, Hashimoto had started working the previous show and joined in on the beatdown on Kuroda, teaming up with the heel wrestlers. So in this match, Kanemaru and Sasaki, they start fighting outside the ring right away. Kanemaru would end up suplexing Sasaki outside the ring. Well, while this is going on, Sekimoto and Mama Sasaki, they lariat each other, with Sekimoto knocking Mammoth down, but Mammoth would end up getting right up and hitting a lariat on Sekimoto. Jintaro, who's now bloody during this match, ends up coming in the ring, and he ends up delivering a shooting star press on Sasaki. Sekimoto makes the save with a power bomb, which is an awesome spot, picking up Jintaro and just driving him down for the power bomb. Mammoth would then end up coming in the ring and choke slamming Sekimoto, but then Hashimoto would end up coming in and delivering a Death Valley driver on Jintaro, and then finishing him off with the XCT and for the win. So Hashimoto gets the pin on Jintaro, and then Takashi Sasaki challenges Kentaro Kanemaru to a singles match, as well as Daisuke Sekimoto challenging Mama Sasaki to a singles match at the next Shinkiba show on June 4th, which draws 300 fans, which again, not a sellout, but a very good number for Shinkiba. So on this show, Tetsuhiro Kuroda would take on Tomohiko Hashimoto. Hashimoto would end up going to suplex Kuroda, who would end up holding on to the referee, and both Kuroda and the referee would end up getting suplexed as a result. Katsumasa Inoue would end up interfering during this match, so Kuroda would end up having to go low and then rolling up Hashimoto with the Samson clutch for the win, so Kuroda gets the win over Hashimoto. Then Mama Sasaki would take on Daisuke Sekimoto. Sekimoto would end up sending Mammoth outside the ring and hitting a tope on the outside on Mammoth. They would end up going back in the ring, and Mammoth would end up hitting Sekimoto with an awesome bomb. And then they would begin hitting each other with lariats until both would end up falling down. Mammoth would then hit a 29 years old on Sekimoto, but Sekimoto would end up kicking out and then delivering a German suplex on Mama Sasaki to get the win, with Sekimoto super excited, getting a big win. Mama Sasaki has more seniority over Sekimoto, and at this point is a bigger star than Sekimoto. So this was a big win for Sekimoto. And then in the main event, Takashi Sasaki would take on Kentaro Kanemaru in a lumberjack death match. So, the heel Takashi Sasaki guys are on one side of the ring and the Apache Army's on the other side of the ring. Well, they begin going right at it with one another. And Sasaki would end up throwing Kanemaru out of the ring, and Sekimoto would end up attacking Kanemaru, and then the Big Japan guys would end up attacking the Apache Army wrestlers with chairs. So they're all brawling outside the ring. Sekimoto would end up powerbombing Kanemaru off the ramp into the ring, and then the Big Japan guys would end up loosening the bottom rope, and Takashi Sasaki would take it, and he would begin choking Kanemaru with the bottom rope. And then Kanemaru would end up managing to throw Sasaki outside the ring, and the Apache Army guys are now attacking Takashi Sasaki. The Big Japan guys would begin fighting them, and then all this is going on. So the Apache Army and the Big Japan guys are brawling, and while all this is going on, Gedo comes into the ring, and he ends up turning on Kanemaru by attacking him. So then Sasaki would end up getting huge heel heat here by doing the old Fuyuki charging lariat while he's screaming up in the air and stomping his feet. And he delivers a lariat to Kanemaru to defeat him. So Sasaki gets a big win over Kanemaru, and with Hito now joining the Takashi Sasaki team. And Jun Kasai would end up running into the ring and attacking Sasaki. And so, again, this was a big win for Sasaki and getting more heel heat as they continue to push him as the top guy in the Apache Army promotion.
WMF then returns on June 11th, and they hold a show at Shinkiba as well. What happens?
So WMF holds a show, and they draw an announced crowd of 300 fans. So, they're only holding a show every once a month or so. I mean, they're doing okay as far as the building itself, filling the building out. Like I said, 300 is pretty good, again, for a Shinkiba show, at least as far as what they've announced. But, that's all they can really do. WMF never really was able to grow. They never were able to hold a Corrigan Hall show. So these are just kind of all they can do. And on this show, the main event is the New Generation Army going up against the FMW veterans. So it's Mr. Gannosuke and Goemon taking on Soldier and Minio Fujita. Gannosuke and Goemon, when taking turns beating on Fujita, Fujita would end up making a comeback and delivering a flying dropkick on Goemon. Soldier would then end up getting tagged in, and he'd spear Goemon, and then he would end up spearing Gannosuke. Fujita would then end up diving over the top rope with a tope con hila on the outside onto Gannosuke, and Soldier would end up hitting a lariat on Goemon for the win. So this was the first big win for the New Generation Army, getting a win over Goemon. Gannosuke would end up shaking Soldier and Fujita's hands. Fujita would then challenge Gannosuke to a singles match. So it's kind of calming down. The New Generation Army finally get a big win, and now it's kind of like, oh, we're all cool with each other now afterwards. You finally beat us, but Fujita now is going to take on Gannosuke at the next show.
Sabu would return to Japan on June 16th and have a match at the Shinjuku Face and a match against Kanemaru. Can you go over the match with us?
So this was a Nosawa booked show, promoted show at Shinjuku Face, and he brought in Sabu. He's brought in Sabu several times for his shows. So this is like a dream match with Kanemaru taking on Sabu. They start off going at it with chairs right away. Sabu would eventually end up hitting a chair over Kanemaru's head. They brawl on the outside. Sabu would end up setting Kanemaru on a table on the outside. Sabu ends up climbing going back in the ring, climbing up the top, and diving off the ropes, and completely misses Kanemaru. So Sabu ends up immediately jumping right back up, jumps on the ramp of the Shinjuku Face, and he ends up just diving onto the table, and it doesn't break. So this was Sabu kind of just screwing, at this point his body's starting to break down. He's not the same Sabu. He's screwing up a lot more frequently, and this is one of them. This was a really, a screwed up spot here. Sabu would end up grabbing a spike, and he would end up beginning to cut open Kanemaru. And Kanemaru would fight back, grabbing a piece of the table that Sabu was having such trouble with earlier. And Kanemaru smashed it over Sabu's head. Kanemaru would then end up setting up a bunch of chairs on top of one another. This takes a little bit. It takes a little while. He just sets chair after chair on top of chair after chair. And as soon as he ends up finishing it, finally, Sabu is up, and he ends up setting up Kanemaru on the top rope, and he ends up suplexing Kanemaru through all the chairs that he spent all the time setting up. So Kanemaru ends up going through all the chairs. Sabu would then end up hitting Arabian Facebuster to get the win over Kanemaru, and Sabu and Kanemaru would then end up hugging afterwards as Kanemaru would lead a welcome back chant for the crowd.
Kanemaru and Tanaka would continue their feud with the Dudleys on June 17th at the Saitama Super Arena, but each side adds a member to the match. Who are they, and what happens during the match?
So this was a rematch of the previous Hustle show in March, but on this show instead it's going to be Kanemaru, Masato Tanaka, and Tomoaki Hama teaming up against Bubba Ray, Devon, and Spike Dudley. So they're bringing in Spike for this show as well. This is a big Hustle show, by the way. Probably their biggest of the year. So right away, Hanma and Spike, they go at it with one another. Kanemaru and Devon are going at it with one another, and then Bubba would end up getting tagged in, and he goes up to Kanemaru and goes, "I don't want you in the match, Kanemaru. I want Tanaka. I want to face off against Tanaka." So Kanemaru tags in Tanaka, and Kanemaru is leading an ECW chant with the crowd as Tanaka's going to go up against the former ECW. The ECW tag team. Bubba would end up slamming Tanaka and covering him with Kanemaru and Hama both having to make the save. Everyone would then begin brawling outside the ring when Bubba would end up picking up Spike on the ramp and then tossing him on Tanaka, Kanemaru, and Hama. Kanemaru and Devon would then end up fighting in the crowd, with Kanemaru getting thrown into a stack of chairs. As Tanaka would end up rushing down the ramp and hitting Bubba Ray with an elbow. Eventually, Tanaka would end up running down the ramp going after Bubba, and Bubba would end up kicking Tanaka and then delivering a power bomb on Tanaka on the ramp. And then Bubba would end up hitting Tanaka in the head with the chair, and Tanaka starts doing the no-sell spot that he did a lot in ECW, where you can hit me as hard as you want with the chair over the head, and it's not going to faze me. Kanemaru would end up coming in the ring, and he would end up getting hit in the head with a trash can, and then Bubba Ray would end up grabbing a cheese grater, and he would end up using a cheese grater on Kanemaru. Spike would then eventually hit a foot stomp on Kanemaru off a ladder. And then Kanemaru would end up grabbing the cheese grater, fighting back, and he would grab the cheese grater, and he ends up using the cheese grater on Bubba Ray's crotch. Tanaka would then end up hitting Bubba Ray with a guitar, but eventually Bubba Ray would end up hitting a Thunderfire powerbomb on Kanemaru through a table, and then Bubba and Devon would end up hitting Hanma with the 3D to get the win. Like I said, the Dudleys weren't going to lose in any of these matches, but these were cool matches. They're remembered pretty well. As for anyone that really remembers Hustle, probably remembers the Dudleys being brought in, and like I said, they were kind of brought in to have these hardcore matches. And so who on the roster is willing to have these hardcore matches? The old FMW and the big Japan guys. They're willing to have these matches, and so that's why they would put them in these type of hardcore death matches a lot.
Mr. Gannosuke then begins working union shows on June 18th in Shinkiba. What happens?
So this was a much smaller, I've talked about it before, where Kanemaru, at this point, Kanemaru's working New Japan regularly. He's worked in the Tokyo Dome, working Corrigan Hall regularly. New Japan, even though they're struggling a lot, they're still the number one promotion in Japan. Well, while this is going on, WMF struggling. Gannosuke doesn't really have that many partnerships, and so to really work with, and really one of the only promotions at this point that's really willing to work with Gannosuke and bring him in and work separate shows is the Union promotion, which is this subgroup that DDT was promoting, and with a whole set of different wrestlers, and the very, very small indie promotion at this time. So Mr. Gannosuke, though, here in the Union promotion, is a heel, and he has a heel manager, and they give him this tag team partner called the Slave, which is this masked wrestler. So he's going to be Gannosuke's partner as he feuds with Poison Sawada and Asami. Poison Sawada, obviously best known as Poison Sawada Julie in DDT. He's not going by the Julie name. He is just Poison Sawada under his old gimmick, his own old look that he had in the 90s. And Asami, who's best known as Asami Kodaka in Big Japan these days, but this was his early days. He's much thinner, much younger. So in this match, Gannosuke and Sawada, they end up brawling outside the ring, and Gannosuke would end up grabbing a stick, and he ends up beginning to cut Sawada with it, cutting him open with the stick. Gannosuke's heel manager would end up interfering and allowing Gannosuke to hit a lariat and eventually finish off Asami with the Fire Thunder. And Gannosuke would end up standing over Asami when Kazuhiko Ogasawara would end up making the save. That's a old karate fighter. He had wrestled in 0-1 years prior. He'd eventually worked the early days of Freedoms. So he ends up making the save. So Gannosuke then gets on the mic and says, on the next Union Pro show, I'm going to have Hizugatsu Oya team up with me. We're going to take out the Union guys. So, like I said, Gannosuke now is going to work for Union Pro regularly, but they're pretty much their top heel.
Tarzan Goto would also run his own show on June 18th at his restaurant in Asakusa, Tokyo. What happens at the show?
So this show has Tarzan Goto, Riki Fuji, and Hisagatsu Oya, the old Lethal Weapon group that had just barely started when Goto ended up leaving FMW prior to the May 5th show. You know, they were going to be kind of the top heels in FMW after Onita left. Well, you know, Goto left right at the start of the group. So this was kind of the, hey, we're back. The Lethal Weapon group is back. And they end up taking on Mr. Pogo, Goemon, and Gasaku. And like I said, you know, this is kind of the rest of the year. Goto and Mr. Pogo are going to feud regularly. So Oya would end up throwing a table at Gasaku, and you know, this is at Tarzan Goto's restaurant, and so it's a much smaller building, and the ceiling is so low that when Oya throws the table, it actually hits the ceiling. Goto would end up coming in, and Mr. Pogo would end up going after him with his sickle. Pogo would end up cutting Goto up with his sickle, but Goto would end up fighting back, and he would clothesline Pogo, and then Goto would end up grabbing a beer bottle and breaking it, and then begin cutting Pogo's forehead with the broken beer bottle. Pogo would then end up taking off. He just heads out, leaves the ring, and Goto would end up hitting a lariat on Goemon to get the win. So the Lethal Weapon team get the win over the Pogo side. Well, afterwards, Tarzan Goto's left, and Mr. Pogo ends up coming back to the ring, and he ends up attacking Tarzan Goto's students. And he ends up blowing a fireball, causing Goto to come back to the ring. Well, Tarzan Goto's valet would end up blowing a fireball that comes in at Mr. Pogo, but it comes nowhere close to him. She is not very good at throwing these fireballs at anyone, based off of what happened last year. So again, this is just to continue, you know, the Apache Army, Kanemaru, they're feuding with New Japan. WMF, you know, they have the young versus old, and Mr. Gannosuke is also working small union promotion. And then Tarzan Goto and Mr. Pogo, they're working together for, you know, the rest of the year, feuding with one another based off their old 1990s FMW rivalry.
So on June 25th, the Apache Army holds a show, as well as a new promotion called Lockup. They also run a show at Shinkiba. What happened at both of those shows?
So the Apache Army would hold a show on June 25th, and they would announce a crowd of 350 fans, so this is the sellout for Shinkiba. They have a street fight with High 69 and Gedo taking on Jun Kasai and Saburo Inamatsu, and Gedo would end up attacking Kasai with a kendo stick, and then he would end up cutting Kasai in the forehead with scissors. Kasai would eventually come back and go for a Pearl Harbor splash, but Gedo would end up hitting him with the kendo stick instead. And then they would end up fighting outside while High 69 would end up pinning Inamatsu. And this isn't even filmed. They missed the pinfall completely as Gedo and Kasai are brawling in the crowd. And then Mama Sasaki and Daisuke Sekimoto, they have another singles match. Sekimoto would end up going for a tope, but Mammoth would move out of the way this time. Sekimoto would manage to deliver a deadlift German suplex on Mammoth, but Mammoth would be able to kick out this time, and then Mammoth would hit 229 years old on Sekimoto to get the win, and then Mammoth would get on the mic and challenge Sekimoto to a match, to the rubber match on August 28th at Corrigan Hall. And then in the main event, it's Kentaro Kanemaru, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, Jun Kasai, and Jintaro taking on Takashi Sasaki, Gedo, High 69, and a mystery partner that turns out to be Taka Michinoku. So Taka Michinoku now is a part of Takashi Sasaki's group. And Kanemaru would end up going at it with Takashi Sasaki. Kanemaru would deliver a powerbomb to Sasaki out of the ring onto the ramp. High 69 would end up kicking Kanemaru low, and Sasaki and Taka Michinoku would end up doing a double super kick, followed by Gedo hitting Kanemaru with a clothesline. High 69 would then end up going for a kick to the head on Kanemaru, but Kanemaru would end up kicking his leg out from under him and then hitting a Thunderfire powerbomb on High 69 for the win, when Togi Makabe New Japan wrestler would end up charging the ring. He comes to the ring, and he ends up clotheslining Kanemaru as Taka Michinoku introduces Makabe as the newest member of the group. So now they're adding New Japan wrestlers, and the Kanemaru Togi Makabe feud has begun. And then also that day, with a lockup show would take place at Shinkiba on the same building, same day. And what lockup was Riki Choshu. After I've talked about, he started up World Japan, that didn't work out. So he started up Riki Pro. And then after so many shows, okay, I've decided I'm done with promoting myself. I want to go back to New Japan. New Japan has offered me to come back to be, to book. And so Riki Choshu now, he's back with New Japan. Well, New Japan's willing to give him kind of a new side project to run and to book whilst booking New Japan. So, Riki Pro is no longer working, but now Riki Choshu's now going to book New Japan promoted shows called Lockup. So, like I said, it's just kind of like their own subgroup. And on this show, it's Kentaro Kanemaru, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, and Jintaro taking on Riki Choshu, Tomohiro Ishii, and Toru Yano. Choshu and Kanemaru, they end up going, they've been feuding for the last 2 years at this point. They go at it with one another. Choshu ends up placing Kanemaru in the Scorpion Deathlock with Jintaro and Tetsuhiro Kuroda using a chair to try and make the save for Kanemaru to get Choshu to break the move. Kanemaru would end up hitting back-to-back sentons on Choshu, but then Kanemaru would run into Choshu's boot. Toru Yano would end up putting Kanemaru in a Canadian backbreaker, and then Choshu would end up suplexing Kanemaru off the top, and then Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Tomohiro Ishii would end up going at it with one another, with Ishii hitting a brainbuster on Kuroda for the win. So the New Japan side end up getting the win over the Apache, and that pretty much will be the official conclusion of Riki Choshu and the whole Apache Army, even though their feud is kind of dead at this point anyway. Especially with Kanemaru feuding with the Liger, Jado, and Gedo group.
On July 1st, WMF runs a show, and it's Gannosuke versus Mineo Fujita as the main event. Can you tell us what happened there?
So this was set up based off the last month where Fujita had challenged Gannosuke to a singles match. And so this was a showcase for Fujita. He was about almost 4 years into the business at this point. And so Gannosuke's giving him a shot here. You can main event in a match against me and see what you got, what you can do. And, Fujita, like I said, he's got some really good high-flying moves, and in this match, he ends up delivering a flying dropkick to Gannosuke, and he also ends up delivering a tope con hilo to the outside on Gannosuke. But it's when he tries for a Firebird splash, he ends up missing the 450, and Gannosuke ends up picking him up and delivering a Fire Thunder for the win. So Gannosuke puts away Fujita, and it's a 25-minute match, and it's a pretty good match. Fujita, like I said, he's kind of starting to really show, hey, I'm not just this young boy anymore. I have the capabilities of putting on a really good performance. And so afterwards, though, Gannosuke and Fujita, they embrace afterwards for having put it on such a good match. And this is kind of the end of the new generation war against the old veterans. Now going forward, it's going to be kind of they're working together. Right now, there's really no heels and faces and big time rivalry going on in WMF.
So on July 11th at Corrigan Hall, Hustle runs a show, and tell us about what happens there.
So Kanemaru ends up teaming up with Tajiri, going up against Toshiaki Kawada and Monster C, and Tajiri had left WWE about a year earlier, come back to Japan, and he was offered to be the head booker in Hustle. So Tajiri right now, he's the matchmaker, he's the one coming up with the storylines and the gimmicks going on with Hustle. So on this match, Kanemaru and Monster C go at it with, I talked about it last episode, how Monster C kind of was this mass character that got really over with the fans chanting C after every time he does something. And so Kanemaru and C are going at it with one another, and after every strike, the crowd is chanting C, C. And so So Kanemaru and C are fighting when Toshiaki Kawada, and they show a close-up of him, and you could tell he is not amused by this crap that they're doing. And he ends up just coming into the ring. He's had enough of it, and he comes over and he just strikes Kanemaru, and the crowd would chant K for Kawada. Tajiri would end up helping Kanemaru put Monster C in the Tree of Woe, and then both end up doing the hustle signature pose, as Kawada would, again, just looking annoyed by all this crap that they're doing. Kanemaru would end up placing Monster C on a table, and he would end up delivering a dive off the top rope, sending C through the table. Kawada would then end up coming in and just begin kicking the crap out of Kanemaru, kicking him in the face, kicking him in the chest, slapping him, and then end up slapping Tajiri as well. Kawada would end up kicking the green mist. Tajiri's trying to spit his green mist at Kawada, and he would just kick him in the face, so the green mist ends up shooting up in the air instead. And then Kawada would end up kicking Tajiri in the head for the win. So Kawada is, he's pretty much one of the top guys in Hustle. Kanemaru and Tajiri, even though there's value in them, they're not anywhere. They're never going to be at the level of a Kawada. Afterwards, the Monster Army, which is Kawada and Monster C are a part of, they come out and they would continue to lay out they would end up laying out Kanemaru and Tajiri when Razor Ramon HG would end up making the save. He was top babyface for the Hustle promotion.
The Apache Army then runs another show at the Shinkiba on July 19th with the announcement that they're going to be bringing back some old FMW titles. What were the titles, and how did that all happen?
So Kanemaru and the Apache Army, they've decided, this promotion's been going on for about 2 years at this point, but what are we fighting for? Well, we need belts. So what are we going to do in regards to just belts? Well, let's bring back the WEW tag team titles, and later on they bring back the WEW world titles. So on this show they announced that they're going to bring back the WEW tag team titles, so now there'll be a tag team division. Starting in August, there'll be a tournament, a round robin tournament throughout a couple shows in August. On this show, Kanemaru, Nosawa, and Mazada going up against Takashi Sasaki, Ryuji Ito, and High 69. And Nosawa and Mazada, they were regulars in Mexico and just freelance promotions for the last couple of years. Nosawa had worked with FMW at the very end, including WEW. Well, now they're working the Apache Army, and in this match, Nosawa would end up hitting a Shining Wizard on High 69, followed by Kanemaru hitting a Thunderfire Powerbomb on High 69 for the win, and then afterwards, Nosawa and Mazada announced that they're going to be working for Apache Army regularly, so they're going to continue to work for the promotion. And then in the main event, and in this match, Hito would end up pulling out scissors and begin using them to cut the forehead of Jun Kasai, as Mammoth and Sekimoto, they end up exchanging clotheslines with one another, like two monsters, two mammoths going up against one another. Mammoth would end up hitting an awesome bomb on Sekimoto to set up Jun Kasai to deliver a Pearl Harbor Splash, but Miyawaki, who's pretty much like the sidekick of the Takashi Sasaki group, he ends up grabbing Jun Kasai's leg and breaking up the count, and Sekimoto would end up hitting a suplex on Jun Kasai off the top, and Hito would end up pile driving Kasai on a stack of chairs for the win, and then Hito would end up going back and cutting Jun Kasai's forehead with the scissors as the Apache Army come in to make the save.
Mr. Gannosuke returns to Union on July 23rd and continues his feud with Poison Sawada in this show. Can you tell us how that all went down?
So on the show, it's Mr. Gannosuke, Hizugatsu Oya, and the Slave. I talked about how Gannosuke on the early on the show the month prior, he said, I'm bringing Hizugatsu Oya in for the next show. So now they're going to team up. They're going to go against Poison Sawada, Kazuhiko Ogasawara, and Isami in a street fight. And they just kind of reunite the feud of Gannosuke and Sawada. This just kind of what's been going on the rest, pretty much all of 2006, is Gannosuke and Sawada. Gannosuke ends up taking Sawada outside, and they end up fighting out in the street of Shinkiba, and then Gannosuke would end up hitting a lariat on Asami once they get back in the ring, and then while Oya would hit the back suplex, and then Oya would end up hitting a backdrop on Isami for the win. So this match, this show is just kind of noted for Hisagatsu Oya and Gannosuke once again reforming their team, this time for Union Pro.
Mr. Pogo's WWS promotion holds a show on July 24th in Saitama, where he forms a team with his longtime rival Matsunaga in a death match. What ends up happening, and what kind of death match was this?
Yeah, so on this show there was a Scorpion death match, which back in the day, Big Japan 96 or so, they would have live scorpions in the ring, and so that's what they're going to do for this show. And it's Pogo and Matsunaga going up against Jun Kasai and the WWS wrestler Naoya. And in this match, Matsunaga would end up putting one of the scorpions on a string, and he ends up going through the crowd as Jun Kasai is running away from Matsunaga holding the scorpion holding it with a string. Matsunaga would end up putting the scorpion in a bucket and then dumping Jun Kasai's head in the bucket. Pogo would end up blowing fire at Naoya, and Matsunaga would end up placing Naoya in a scorpion deathlock with his body on the box of the scorpions, with the referee ending the match there. Naoya would end up having to be stretchered off as a result, so they were playing up the scorpions and what they did to him. And then Matsunaga would end up throwing the scorpion on a string at him.
So after 6 years of being gone, Tenryu brings back War on July 27th at Corrigan Hall. What happened there?
So this was kind of a reunion show. War had last ran a show in 2000, and so Tenryu's kind of bringing everyone back for, kind of one of those revival shows. This was the only time that he ever would do it. So this is the last ever War show. And on this show, it's going to be Jado and Gedo going up against Kentaro Kanemaru and Jintaro. And Jado and Gedo, they're wearing their old yellow pajama pants that they wore in War, as well as the early days of FMW, as well as they're wearing the purple Fuyuki robes that they would come out to with Fuyuki. And so during this match, Kanemaru and Jintaro, they end up attacking Jado and Gedo before the bell. Jintaro would end up hitting a Sasuke special on all of them outside the ring. They would all end up brawling in the crowd, and then Kanemaru would end up busting Gedo open, and then they would end up Kanemaru and Jintaro end up taking turns beating on Gedo. Jintaro would actually try to mock Gedo by doing his Superfly Splash, but Gedo would end up getting his knees up and make the tag to Jado. Kanemaru and Gedo would end up getting into a fight, and Kanemaru would end up throwing the referee out of the ring, and Kanemaru would then end up setting up a bunch of chairs, and he's going to try and do the same spot he did with Sabu a month earlier, where he stacks all the chairs up on one another. But again, it doesn't work out for him. Jado would end up grabbing Kanemaru after he's done all the setup, and Jado ends up suplexing Kanemaru off the top rope through the chairs, and then Jado would end up getting Kanemaru in a crossface, as Gedo would end up hitting a Superfly Splash on Jintaro for the win. So Jado and Gedo get the win at the War reunion show. They were the regular War guys. Kanemaru and Jintaro were the outsiders.
CTU holds their own show on July 30th with the conclusion of the Apache Army versus CTU feud. What happens?
So it's just 3 days later. It's pretty much the same match, except instead of Jintaro, it's Kuroda. So now it's Kentaro Kanemaru and Tetsuhiro Kuroda going up against Jado and Gedo. This, like you said, this was a CTU show. So New Japan's putting the show on, but it's under the CTU, which is a heel group in New Japan, or a specific stable in New Japan. So this is their show, and they start right away by brawling in the crowd. Jado and Kuroda, they end up taking turns doing their, Kuroda does his running lariat through the crowd at Corrigan, and Jado would end up doing his own lariat in the crowd as well. And then Kanemaru and Gedo, they're fighting with one another. They would end up busting each other open, so both of them are bleeding, and Kanemaru and Gedo were giving elbow strikes to one another while blood is running down their face, until Gedo would end up knocking Kanemaru down and then delivering a super kick. Well, Kuroda would end up coming in and going for a lariat with Jado tripping Kuroda, and then Gedo would then end up rolling Kuroda up for the win with the Gedo clutch. So Jado and Gedo get the win over Kanemaru and Kuroda. Gentaro would end up rushing in the ring right away and attacking Gedo, with Jado end up making the save. And so this was pretty much the climax of the CTU Kanemaru Apache Army feud. The Kanemaru is going to end up pretty much now feuding with the rest of with the Takashi Sasaki group, as well as Togi Makabe. So this was pretty much the climax with Jado and Gedo getting the win. And then the very last match of the CTU versus Apache Army feud, even though Hito's technically not a part of the Apache Army group anymore. It's Hito going up against Jushin Liger, which is Jushin Liger under his evil persona. And he hadn't done this persona in 10 years since his match with Kiji Muto, or the Great Muta, when the Great Muta ended up pulling Liger's mask off, and it would be revealed that Liger had all this pain on him, and he had his own evil persona as well. So now Liger's bringing this gimmick back after 10 years and going by the name Jushin Liger. And Jushin Liger comes to the ring with a towel over his head, and then as he walking slowly to the ring to like an evil version of the Liger theme song, he ends up pulling the towel off and revealing he has like Kiss makeup on. And he ends up spitting red mist in the air, and he ends up going after Hito right away. They end up brawling in the crowd. Hito, though, would pull out his scissors and, to booze. So, talked about how in April at the Apache show, everyone's cheering for Hito, cutting Liger's hair and everything. Well, now he pulls out scissors, and the New Japan crowd, they're booing him for this. Hito would begin stabbing Liger with the scissors when Takashi Sasaki, he ends up helping out Hito during this match. He ends up tripping Liger and distracting the referee, as Hito would end up pulling out a staple gun on Liger. And he ends up using the staple gun on Liger. Liger would end up fighting back and end up throwing Hito into the ref and then spitting red mist at him. Liger would then take Hito out and pile drive him onto the floor, and then throw a box of objects into the ring. And he would end up grabbing a screwdriver that was in the box, and he ends up beginning to use the screwdriver to cut Hito up. Liger then would end up hitting Hito and Takashi Sasaki both with chairs, and Liger would then end up finishing off Hito with a brainbuster on the stack of chairs. This was not a good match. It was slow. It was just kind of, let's do this spot, let's do this spot. They had some good ideas on what to do, but by no means this is a good match. Liger has a cool look and he looks different. I don't think he ever brought this gimmick back, but this was pretty much the climax of the CTU Apache Army feud right here. Now the Apache Army is going to be going to war against Togi Makabe and the rest of the Takashi Sasaki group as the CTU guys, Jado, Gedo, and Liger move on.
The finals of the WEW Tag Team Tournament takes place on August 6th at Shinkiba for the Apache Army. What's the end results of the tournament?
So they've done a tournament for about 5 days here, round robin at Shinkiba, and the finals eventually led to Takashi Sasaki and Hito going up against Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Jun Kasai. And so during this match, Hito ends up pulling out his scissors again, and he uses them to cut open Jun Kasai, and then he ends up hitting Kasai with multiple barbed wire bat shots to the chest, and then Kuroda ends up coming in trying to make the save and delivering a lariat to Hito, as Jun Kasai would deliver his Pearl Harbor Splash. But as he's making the pinfall after hitting this Pearl Harbor Splash, Hito grabs his scissors and it ends up stabbing Kasai in the forehead, and then Hito would end up getting the win over Jun Kasai after he hits 3 consecutive tombstone pile drivers to get the win. And so Takashi Sasaki and Hito win the WEW Tag Team title. So they're the first champions in about 3 years. They're the first team to hold the titles in about 3 years.
So on August 27th, Tarzan Goto would continue his rivalry with Mr. Pogo on a show in Asakusa with a stipulation to their match. What was the stipulation?
So on this show, the stipulation is that the losing team, so Goto's the representative of his team, Mr. Pogo's the representative of his team. The losing team, Goto or Pogo, would end up having to wear a maid outfit. Kind of like maid restaurants or maid cafes are really popular in Japan, and so it's just this totally humiliating, having to wear a gown and everything. So. In this match, it's Goto and Batman X and another one of his students against Mr. Pogo and a couple of the Goto students as well. Goto would end up giving his valet a watermelon, who would end up smashing it over Pogo's head. Goto would then end up beating on his students that are on the teaming up with Pogo, and he's just destroying them. Pogo's not going to be able to take that much offense, but these young boys that Goto is training, they're gonna sell. They're gonna get their ass kicked by their teacher. Up until about the time where Goto ends up hitting a lariat so hard that the guy that he hits the lariat that's on Pogo's team ends up falling into one of the students that's on Goto's team, and then they end up. So the Pogo team ends up pinning the guy on Goto's team, and I don't know their names. I tried looking them up, but they're so obscure that I don't think they did anything else for me to be able to find their names out. So anyways, the Pogo team ends up getting the win, and as a result, Tarzan Goto now has to wear a maid outfit, and so they end up showing Goto all mad that he's wearing this maid outfit, and he's having to serve Pogo afterwards. Like I said, this is at Goto's restaurant, so there's chairs and tables and everything, and so he's serving them drinks, and Pogo is just eating this up that Goto has to dress up as a maid and serve him. Well, Goto's so pissed off by that, he ends up pouring a drink over Pogo's head, end up walking away upset. So Goto's the one humiliated, but he gets the heat back by humiliating Pogo afterwards by pouring water on him.
WMF holds their 4-year anniversary show on August 27th at Shinkiba. Mineo Fujita faces off against a mystery opponent in the main event. Who was the mystery opponent?
So Mineo Fujita would main event against Kenji Sararagi, but it's Sararagi coming out under his new gimmick, which is Kamui. And Kamui is this Hayabusa-inspired mask gimmick. He's got kind of like the Hayabusa pants as well, except he's just a lot smaller than Hayabusa was. So it's going to be Fujita versus Kamui, and Kamui ends up hitting a flying drop kick, and then he delivers a really impressive-looking Asai moonsault on Fujita to the outside. Kamui would end up missing a Phoenix Splash, and that would lead to Mineo Fujita hitting a Tiger Suplex for the win. So Kenji Sararagi now has been changed. They've given him a makeover, and now he's going to be Kamui, who is probably most people know as a Freedom's regular wrestler.
The Apache Army would return to Corrigan Hall on August 28th as they would bring in talent from both All Japan and New Japan on this show. Can you go over what happens there?
So they end up drawing an announced crowd of about 1,000 fans. So this is still down from the April show, but again, this crowd is hot. And again, I would have to imagine this is a near legitimate announced crowd, probably 1,000 fans or so. And I think that's just kind of what Apache now is going to aim for. It's like, hey, our big show of the year, April, we'll try and draw about 1,200, and then every other show we'll try and get about 1,000. So I don't think this was necessarily a disappointment. I think it's just kind of this is what they're expecting, and and again, I know when I talked to Kanemaru, and he wanted to bring back when he started up the ING promotion last year, his goal was, I know it's not going to sell out Corrigan or anything like that, but I want a passionate fan base for my shows, and that's what around this time period, what the Apache Army was. They're not selling out Corrigan Hall. They're not filling up. There's a lot of empty seats, but these near about 1,000 fans are super passionate, cheering for the Apache Army. So. There's on this show. It's Jun Kasai versus Gedo. They've just kind of been in a rivalry for the last 2 months or so, with Gedo using scissors all the time on Jun Kasai's forehead. Well, then this match, Gedo ends up pulling out the scissors again, but this time Kasai would end up grabbing them away, and he would begin stabbing Gedo in the forehead instead. Well, Gedo would then pull out a needle, and he would begin stabbing Kasai in the arm, and then hit Kasai with a barbed wire bat. Kasai would end up fighting back, and he would deliver a Pearl Harbor splash on Gedo, but Gedo would end up grabbing the needle and stabbing Kasai in the forehead as the referee was making the count. So this is how Gedo ends up breaking out of moves, or to stop the count, is by using a weapon on his opponent. Gedo would then end up delivering 3 tombstone pile drivers in a row, and Gedo would end up defeating Jun Kasai. And then Miyawaki would come into the ring and grab a hold of Kasai and let Gedo lay the boots to Kasai when Tomohoki Hama would rush to the ring and make the save for Kasai. So Hama and Kasai now, they're going to be a tag team in the Apache Army promotion. And then in the semi-main event, it's the rubber match. It's Mammoth Sasaki going up against Daisuke Sekimoto. They would charge at each other right away while locking up. Sekimoto would end up knocking Mammoth out of the ring and then hitting a tope on Mammoth to the outside. Sekimoto would then charge at Mammoth, who would move out of the way, and Sekimoto would end up hitting his shoulder on the turnbuckle instead. Mammoth would then try to powerbomb Sekimoto outside the ring, but Sekimoto would end up turning it around and suplexing Mammoth on a stack of chairs outside the ring. And then Sekimoto would then end up delivering a deadlift suplex on Mammoth, as they both would make it up to their feet, and they would both hit hard clotheslines on each other. But Mammoth then would end up delivering an awesome bomb and then finishing Sekimoto off with the 29 years old. So Mammoth gets the win in the rubber match. Again, he's has more seniority, so he's going to have more say in who wins and loses to. And so he defeats Daisuke Sekimoto here. And then in the main event, it's Kentaro Kanemaru, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, teaming up with All Japan's Satoshi Kojima. So this is Kojima's first time kind of, working with the Apache guys in a couple of years now, since 2004, when he worked a match against Gedo. And so they're teaming up to take on Takashi Sasaki, Shiro Kashinaka, and Togi Makabe. And so, there's an All Japan guy on the Kanemaru side, and Takashi Sasaki has New Japan guys on his side. And this is going to be a barbed wire board death match. Kojima would end up trying to send Makabe into the barbed wire board, but Makabe would end up reversing it, and he would send Kojima into the barbed wire board instead. They would all end up brawling in the crowd, and Kojima would end up getting suplexed into the barbed wire board by Takashi Sasaki and Togi Makabe, and then Makabe would end up sending Kanemaru into the barbed wire board. Eventually, Kanemaru and Makabe would end up going at it with one another, and their rivalry is starting to really pick up here between those two. Kanemaru would end up tagging Kuroda, and Kuroda comes in from the hot tag, and he comes in and he clotheslines Koshinaka. Kuroda would then end up going for the Tekken Buster, but Taka Michinoku, who had accompanied the Takashi Sasaki team, he was their manager pretty much for this match. He ends up throwing powder at Kuroda, and then Makabe would end up delivering a power bomb through a stack of chairs on Kanemaru. Well, then Makabe would end up going for another power bomb on Kanemaru when Kuroda would end up spearing Makabe into the barbed wire board. Sasaki would then end up holding on to Kanemaru as Taka Michinoku now is going to try to go to throw powder once again, this time at Kanemaru, when Goito, who hasn't been seen in 2 years, he ends up showing up out of nowhere, and he ends up delivering a dropkick to Taka to make the save to prevent Taka from throwing the powder at Kanemaru, and then Kanemaru would end up suplexing Takashi Sasaki onto the barbed wire board and then hitting a Thunderfire powerbomb on the barbed wire board. So Kanemaru gets the pinfall over Takashi Sasaki. Makabe ends up attacking Kanemaru right away afterwards, and all the wrestlers from both sides, they all start brawling in the ring, pretty much to end the show. This was a good match, but like I said, it had really good heat. The crowd was really passionate for this. They really loved their Apache Army once again. But like I said, I would say this was a successful show with a really good main event, and everything that they were trying for clicked here.
Hayabusa returns to America for the first time in 6 years, but also the first time since his accident. What did he end up doing while he was over there?
So Fumi Saito, who is a Pro Wrestling Weekly columnist and been friends with Hayabusa for a long time, he set up this trip for Hayabusa where they both would go to America, go through a couple states, and PWU, which was his promotion, independent promotion in Philadelphia, set up for Hayabusa to make an appearance at their show, be at the gimmick table, sign autographs, take pictures, and then he would end up end up singing a song at the beginning of the show, and the song was in Japanese, so it didn't get much of a reaction from the crowd because they didn't know what he was saying. But afterwards they gave him a nice ovation, and this was at the ECW arena, so this was Hayabusa's very first time at the ECW arena. He would end up getting paid $200 by the promoter, and then again, this was just kind of his way of touring around America. He never really had the chance to. I mean, when he was in America previously, he lived in Florida, and he worked ECW, which would have been Ohio, but he barely got any chance to really. It was in and out, and same thing, in Texas, and he had been in California. So this was his first time to really kind of be around the Northeast. So he went to New York. He went to Bubba Gump Shrimp. He went and ate there. He saw Madison Square Garden, and then afterwards, after going to New York, then they went to Boston, and that was where WWE was holding their shows around this time period, Raw, SmackDown, and he came and he went to the show, and John Laurinaitis, who was high up with WWE at the time, he still works there. He had a great relationship with Hayabusa, and he was working all Japan when Hayabusa was a big name in FMW, and so he kind of got his connections to get Hayabusa backstage. And Hayabusa there got to meet a lot of wrestlers. He met Edge, he met Lita, he met John Cena. He actually met Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon. They took a picture with him as well. But the big one that he got to meet was Sabu. He hadn't seen Sabu in a little while. And so, and when him and Sabu saw each other, they hugged. And, like I've talked about in the past, how Sabu loves Hayabusa. So, that was a great experience. And Hayabusa and Sabu afterwards ended up staying at the hotel together and getting drunk at the hotel bar afterwards, so just reminiscing about old times. And then afterwards, Hayabusa actually went to Stamford, Connecticut, and he took a picture outside the WWE offices, outside of Titan Towers. He had a really good time. He made a little bit of money and going to the PWU show. He also got paid to do a shoot interview with RF Video, and while getting to see the Northeast for the very first time, as well as going to a WWE show for the first time.
Going back to Japan, Big Japan holds a show on September 10th at the Yokohama Bunka Gym. What involvement did the Apache Army have on this show?
So the semi-main event is Masato Tanaka and Tetsuhiro Kuroda going up against Daisuke Sekimoto and Yoshihito Sasaki. So this is kind of a rematch of the March 31st show I talked about earlier. So in this match, though, Sasaki would end up trying to suplex Kuroda, but Sekimoto would end up grabbing both of Kuroda and Sasaki, and he ends up delivering a suplex to both of them. And then eventually Tanaka would end up ducking a clothesline from Sekimoto and delivering a rolling elbow smash and getting the pin over Sekimoto. So again, Tanaka and Kuroda get the win over Sekimoto and Yoshihito Sasaki. But in the main event, it's Ryuji Ito versus Takashi Sasaki. This is a deathmatch heavyweight title match, so Sasaki's putting his belt on the line. It's an iron cage, spider net, barbed wire death match. Ito and Sasaki, they end up fighting on top of the iron cage, or a ladder over the iron cage, with Ito kicking Sasaki off the ladder and Sasaki falling into the spider net barbed wire. Ito would then end up doing this spot where he sets the ladder up on top of the cage. This is a tall ladder too, and he ends up trying to do a dragon splash off the ladder that's on an iron cage, and he just hits his face first. He lands face first on the mat. So this was a total botch. This was probably the specific ending to the match but Ito just blew it by completely missing Sasaki. So eventually, I guess they improvised, and Ito would end up suplexing Sasaki to get the win. And so Ryuji Ito now wins back the Big Japan Deathmatch Heavyweight title against Takashi Sasaki. So they're taking the title belt off Sasaki. Sasaki didn't do too many jobs while he was champion in Apache Army, and he did no deathmatch jobs. So this will open him up to be able to job a couple more times in Apache Army, but he would end up winning the title back in December, so he wouldn't be without the title for very long.
The Apache Army comes back to Corrigan Hall after just a month for another show on September 24th, with the main event determining the first WEW champion in 4 years.
So the semi-main event is Takashi Sasaki and Hito defending their WEW tag team titles in a street fight, barbed wire, baseball bat, ladder death match against Jun Kasai and Tomoaki Hama. In this match, Hama would end up knocking Sasaki off the ladder, but as he tries to grab the barbed wire bat that's above the ring, Hito would end up knocking Hama off the ladder, and then Kasai would end up trying to splash Hito in the corner, but Hito would end up throwing the referee Nikon Lee in the way of Kasai to prevent him from being able to deliver a splash. And then Miyawaki, who he ends up interfering, and then he ends up helping Takashi Sasaki double team Jun Kasai with Nikon Lee, the referee, out of the way. Sasaki would end up trying for a right leg kick to the head of Jun Kasai, but with the barbed wire bat, but he would end up missing it, and then Jun Kasai would end up using the bat and hitting Takashi Sasaki with it, and then delivering a Pearl Harbor splash on Hito to win the WEW tag team titles. And then in the main event, this match is actually kind of interesting because this show, as far as I know, never aired fully on Samurai TV, but randomly, after a couple months after it took place, I found it on YouTube. And, it's as if Samurai TV had aired it, but I've never seen it anywhere else. I've never saw it announced on Samurai TV, but somewhere this full match got posted on YouTube. It's since been taken down, but I read comments from after I watched it back in 2006, and I made mention that it was a bad match. I think just because it was really slow, but it's Kentaro Kanemaru challenging Togi Makabe, and the winner, they're bringing back the WEW World Title. The winner is the first WEW champion since 2003, and it's a chain double hell barbed wire death match. So both wrestlers are chained up against one another, and there's barbed wire outside the ring. Makabe would end up using the chain to spear Kanemaru right away, and he would end up punching Kanemaru with the chain. And then eventually Makabe would end up clotheslining Kanemaru off the apron into the barbed wire boards outside the ring. Kanemaru would end up managing to send Makabe into the barbed wire board and then set up Makabe on a table outside the ring. But as Kanemaru ends up climbing the top of turnbuckle, Makabe would end up using the chain to pull him off the top turnbuckle, sending Kanemaru down to the mat. That's probably the key spot there of the matches. Makabe would then end up delivering a Death Valley driver on the table and then finishing Kanemaru off with a lariat to get the win. Like I may mention, I made a comment how this was, when I watched it back in 2006, I would not say it was a good match. Highlight-wise, though, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens here. It looks like a really cool match, but again, I think it's just a lot of cool stuff buried in with a bunch of just dragging and nothing happening. But Togi Makabe now is the WEW champion, and how he is pretty much going to be the main focal heel of the promotion going forward.
Gannosuke's feud with Poison Sawada would continue in Union on September 28th at Shinkiba. What happens at that show?
So this show, it's Mr. Gannosuke teaming up with the Slave, that masked guy, who I don't know who he is, against Poison Sawada and Shuji Ishikawa, who most people now know. He's an All Japan wrestler now, but he's been in DDT, he's been in Big Japan. He's still as tall as he is now, but he's a lot thinner. And this is a musical instrument death match. So there's drums, there's guitars all over the ring. Ishikawa would end up grabbing Mr. Gannosuke's heel manager. Ishikawa ended up grabbing him and suplexing him, followed by and then he would follow that up by suplexing the Slave, and then following that up by suplexing Gannosuke. The Slave would end up tying up Ishikawa to the turnbuckle, so that Gannosuke would end up grabbing one of the guitars and smashing it over Poison Sawada's head, and then delivering a Fire Thunder for the win.
WMF then returns to Shinkiba on September 30th. Can you go over the show with us?
So on this show, the semi-main event is Gasaku going up against Kyoko Kimura. So it's a male versus female street fight. Kyoko Kimura, probably best known now these days as Hana Kimura's mother, who's working for Stardom and Wrestle One. But she was doing death matches around this time period. She had a light tube death match with Yuko Miyamoto around this time period. So she's willing to, go at it and fight the guys. And so in this match, Kimura would end up wrapping a chain around Gasaku's throat as they fought in the crowd. Kimura would then end up kicking Gasaku low, but Gasaku, who he no-sells it, I guess, based off the whole, did the whole transvestite angle 6 years earlier in FMW. So he ends up no-selling it and then rolling up Kyoko for the win. So Gasaku defeats Kyoko Kimura, and then the main event, it's Mr. Gannosuke, Gasaku Gashigawara, and Riki Fuji going up against Soldier, Minio Fujita, and Kamui. And so this is, again, kind of one of those old FMW veterans versus the new generation, but it's not this heated rivalry or anything like that. It's just a match. And in this match, it's Kamui would end up hitting a Firebird Splash on Gasaku, and then Minio Fujita would end up hitting a Swanton Bomb on Riki Fuji. Gannosuke would eventually fight and hit a super power bomb on Soldier, and then deliver a Fire Thunder, or try to deliver a Fire Thunder on Soldier, but Soldier would end up escaping and then hitting a lariat on Gannosuke. Gannosuke would end up trying for a Gannosuke clutch on Soldier, but Soldier would end up reversing it and getting the win over Gannosuke. So Soldier, Fujita, and Kamui win. So the young boys, the new generation, they end up winning the match, and afterwards they all celebrate together. So again, at this point, there's really no feud going on in WMF.
Tarzan Goto would then hold a show on October 1st in Asakusa as he would continue his feud with Pogo. What happens between the two of them?
So this match is going to have the same stipulation as the August show, where the loser has to dress up as a maid. So it's going to be Tarzan Goto and Kamui going up against Giant Pogo and Black Dog. And Giant Pogo obviously isn't Mr. Pogo, but he's dressed up like Mr. Pogo. He's got the face paint and everything, but they're representing Pogo here. So if Pogo's team loses, then Pogo has to dress up as a maid. If Goto loses, he has to dress up as a maid again. And in this match, Goto would end up breaking a bottle and then using it on Giant Pogo, and then Goto would throw Pogo out of the ring where Riki Fuji is, and Fuji ends up hitting Pogo outside the ring. And then eventually Goto would finish off the Black Dog with the lariat, so the Tarzan Goto team gets the win, and now Mr. Pogo has to wear a maid outfit. And they end up making Mr. Pogo pose with all the wrestlers and everyone in attendance, these group pictures with the maid outfit on, and then Pogo then would have to serve all the wrestlers, and again, he's humiliated just like Goto was a couple months earlier. And just like what Goto did, Pogo then ends up throwing water at Goto, and Pogo ends up walking away in disgust of what Tarzan Goto is making him do.
The Apache Army holds a show on October 21st at Shinkiba and ends up apologizing on the show for some confusion afterwards. What happened, and what was all the confusion about?
So, right before the show, WWE.com had announced that Super Leather, Mike Kirshner, had passed away. And so they have this obituary and everything, and it gets out, and, I made the mistake because WWE reported it. I actually told Gannosuke, hey, Super Leather passed away. And then he starts posting it online, and other Hayabusa makes this blog post about it and everything, what a great guy Super Leather was. And right before, Apache Army was holding a show that day, and so Kanemaru gets word of it, and he ends up having a 10-bell salute for Super Leather right before the show. Well, a day later comes out, Super Leather finds out hey, WWE just posted that I passed away. What's going on? And it turns out someone else had passed away, and WWE had just confused that person with Super Leather, and so Super Leather comes out and was like, I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm not dead. And so afterwards, Kanemaru would have to apologize that they did a 10-bell salute for Super Leather, even though he was not dead. So on this show, Jun Kasai and Saburo Inamatsu going up against Takashi Sasaki and Hito in a table, ladder, and barbed wire board death match. Kasai would end up hitting a Pearl Harbor splash on the ladder, off the ladder on Hito, and then to get the win. So this is kind of Kasai getting his revenge back on Hito. And then the main event, it's Kentaro Kanemaru and Mama Sasaki going up against Togi Makabe and Daisuke Sekimoto, and Kanemaru would end up pinning Sekimoto with the Senton Splash. And then it would be announced that the next Korakuen Hall show would be FMW versus New Japan, with Makabe and Koshinaka having a mystery partner that would be a New Japan wrestler going up against the FMW team of Kentaro Kanemaru, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, and Mama Sasaki.
So on October 29th, Mr. Pogo would then run another show for WWS in Gunma. What happens there?
So Mr. Pogo takes on the Wolf in a tag match, but it's mostly Mr. Pogo going up against the Wolf. The other two guys I don't really know anything about. So Pogo ends up taking the Wolf. And this is one of those shows where there's no ring. It's just at this venue, and so Pogo is not going to do any like bumps or anything on a mat. So he takes the Wolf outside the building. They end up brawling into the elevator and then going downstairs to the outside where they're fighting on the street again. Pogo would end up delivering this really bad-looking pile driver in a puddle on the Wolf. Pogo then ends up blowing fire that comes nowhere close to the Wolf, and then they end up making it back into the mat. And then Pogo would end up wrapping a chain around the Wolf for the win. So it's, again, one of those WWS shows where, hey, let's go outside because we don't have a natural ring. Let's go outside and make up for the fact that, hey, Mr. Pogo's not going to do anything on a mat. But he'll do a bad-looking pile driver in the street. But these kind of shows were always really cool. I always really liked these kind of shows.
So now at the end of the Gannosuke versus Poison Sawada feud, on November 1st in Union at Shinkiba, what happens there and what kind of death match did they do?
So this is a singles match between Gannosuke and Sawada, and this is going to be a raw fish death match. And Gannosuke would end up grabbing the dead fish and shoving it in Sawada's face and mouth. He would then end up shoving the dead fish in Sawada's pants. Sawada would then end up tripping Gannosuke face first into the dead fish, and then put the cattle mutilation on Gannosuke when Gannosuke's manager would break up the move. Sawada would then end up shoving the manager in the bucket of the dead fish when Gannosuke would take that opportunity to come over and drop the whole bucket on Sawada and pin Sawada. So Gannosuke gets the win over Sawada in this disgusting match. Afterwards, Tatsutoshi Goto, who's an old New Japan wrestler, would come out, and now he's going to feud with Gannosuke pretty much for the rest of the year.
Ugh. The Apache Army would hold their last Korakuen Hall show of the year on November 2nd for a New Japan versus FMW main event. Tell us what happens at the show.
So this show drew an announced crowd of 1,050, so, I mean, again, just kind of in that range of what the Apache Army is doing. And so the semi-main event of the show is Jun Kasai versus Takashi Sasaki in a barbed wire board glass crash death match. During this match, Sasaki would end up sending Kasai into the barbed wire board right away, and then he ends up powerbombing him onto the barbed wire board. Sasaki ends up trying to send Kasai into the barbed wire board once again, but Kasai would reverse it and send Sasaki into the barbed wire board instead. And then Kasai would set up Sasaki outside the ring on a table, and Kasai would end up climbing the ladder. And it's a pretty impressive spot with Kasai diving off the ladder, sending Sasaki through the table outside the ring. Kasai would try to hit a Pearl Harbor splash, but Sasaki would end up getting his knees up to prevent it, and then Sasaki would then powerbomb Kasai through the glass. And this is a different type of glass that's used today. Now it's mostly like a glass board, but this is more like a windshield type of glass. Sasaki would then mock Kasai by putting on Kasai's goggles, and he climbs up the top rope like he's going to do the Pearl Harbor Splash himself, but Kasai would end up getting up and suplexing Sasaki through the glass, and then Kasai would end up placing the glass over Sasaki and hitting the Pearl Harbor Splash off the ladder for the win. So Kasai gets his rematch, gets his win back over Sasaki, now that Sasaki's not the deathmatch heavyweight champion in Big Japan anymore. And then the main event is the New Japan team versus the FMW team. It's Kanemaru, Kuroda, and Mama Sasaki going up against Togi Makabe, Shiro Koshinaka, and Hiroshi Tenzan. He's going to be the mystery partner here. And there are loud boos for the New Japan team here. Kanemaru and Tenzan is embracing the hate. You can tell he just does not want to be there either. This is indie trash to him. That's the impression I always got seeing him compete in Apache Army. During this match, Kanemaru and Makabe would end up going right at it with one another. Kanemaru would end up delivering a Hurricane Rana on Makabe, but then Makabe would end up spearing Kanemaru, and then they would end up brawling outside. Koshinaka would go for a hip attack on Mammoth, but Mammoth would end up grabbing him and suplexing him. Kanemaru would end up placing Tenzan on the table in the crowd, and then Kanemaru would end up doing a dive off the entrance of Corrigan Hall in the crowd, sending Tenzan through the table. Makabe and Kuroda would end up fighting backstage at Corrigan, and Makabe ends up throwing a trash can at Kuroda. Eventually, all three New Japan guys would get in the ring, and they would throw all three Apache guys into one another. Tenzan would end up accidentally clotheslining Koshinaka, and then Kuroda would deliver a kick low to Tenzan, and then tagging Kanemaru in. Kanemaru and Kuroda would try to suplex Koshinaka, but Makabe would end up coming in and helping Koshinaka, and they would end up suplexing Kuroda and Kanemaru instead. Mammoth would end up coming in and smashing the broken table over all the New Japan guys' heads. Mammoth would then end up hitting a bad-looking Mammoth home run on Tenzan, and then Makabe would end up hitting Mammoth with his chain, and then hitting a lariat with his chain on Mammoth for the win. So the New Japan guys get the win. They're not going to job to the FMW guys here, and the feud is going to continue with Makabe and Kanemaru going forward. That's just the main feud now, pretty much, with Takashi Sasaki kind of being pulled back to the semi-main event.
WMF then returns to Shinkiba on November 4th with the announcement of the newest member of WMF, as well as a new person going by the Hayabusa name on the show. Who are these people, and what happened?
So on the show, this independent wrestler, SYU, he had been working WMF somewhat in the past. Well, he has an alter ego gimmick that he's now using in WMF called Kitten Kid, and it's pretty much this kitten costume from head to toe, and has the tail and everything. And so it is announced that Kitten Kid is going to be a regular going forward in WMF, and he's going to feud with Gannosuke in 2007 actually. And then also there's this announced match. It's Hayabusa and Goemon against Riki Fuji and Kasaku, and the Hayabusa music plays, and this guy comes out in the Hayabusa costume, and it's actually Hideki Hosaka, who, had been an FMW regular, and he hadn't really been heard from too much in the last couple years, but he's back with WMF, and he's now under the Hayabusa gimmick. I mean, it's not too much of a stretch. Hosaka has lost a lot of weight. Obviously, again, he's not as tall as Hayabusa, and you could tell, obviously, it's not Hayabusa, but there's been, people that look a lot less like Hayabusa than Hosaka does here. Anyway, and the one thing about Hosaka, though, is he doesn't have that much of a he doesn't have many high-flying moves here. He has the Hurricane Rana, and he takes advantage of that. So during this match, Hayabusa would hit a Hurricane Rana right away on Riki Fuji. Riki Fuji would end up bringing in a ladder, as Kasaku would end up going to climb it. Goemon would end up grabbing Gasaku, and Hayabusa would end up powerbombing Gasaku off the ladder. Gasaku would end up charging a Hayabusa, but he would end up running into the ladder instead, as Hayabusa would end up hitting the Hurricane Rana on Gasaku for the win. Again, Osaka's not going to do anything else but the Hurricane Rana as a high-flying move. And in the main event, it's Mr. Gannosuke and Minya Fujita taking on Tatsutoshi's Goto and Soldier. Gannosuke and Goto would trade backdrops and with one another, and then begin fighting outside the ring, as Fujita would end up hitting a Tiger Suplex and a Firebird Splash on Soldier for the win, and afterwards Gannosuke and Goto would continue to brawl. So they're going to take their feud to Union, and they would work another WMF show here. Gannosuke and Goto were actually, Tatsutoshi Goto were actually really good friends, and I have a story. It's kind of embarrassing. This is a couple years later, in 2009. I was at Shinkiba outside, and Gannosuke and Goto, Tatsutoshi Goto, were talking to each other and everything, and I went up to Gannosuke thinking Goto was a fan, and I was like, hey, will you take a picture with me? And he's like, well, there's no one to take a picture with us. And so I go up to Goto and go, here, will you take our picture? And so Tatsutoshi Goto, who's been a wrestler New Japan since the 80s, took a picture with me and Gannosuke, me not realizing that this is a 20-plus year veteran, asking him to take the picture of me and Gannosuke.
Mitsuhiro Matsunaga would return to 0-1 a year after his Stop the Matsunaga angle. What took place this time?
So, we talked about last episode with the Stop the Matsunaga angle, where Matsunaga is destroying everyone, causing chaos in 0-1 before Yoshihito Sasaki finally defeats him in a barbed wire death match, and Matsunaga would end up disappearing for about 11 months. Well, he ends up reappearing, and now he's with Kazunori Murakami, who's this, badass shoot fighter. He's from the Big Mouth Loud promotion, and they're going to form a tag team. They're going to cause chaos together. And so they team up on October 12th with Matsunaga going up against Yoshihito Sasaki, and like I said, in a tag match. Sasaki would end up hitting Matsunaga with the chair, and then as Sasaki ends up trying to put Matsunaga in the torture rack, Matsunaga would end up setting a fireball off in Sasaki's face, and Matsunaga would end up getting the win over Sasaki. So that leads to October 27th with Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Kazunori Murakami teaming up against Shinjiro Otani and Masato Tanaka at Corrigan Hall. And during this match, Matsunaga would go to spike Tanaka when Katsumi Yusuda, who was this old Battle Arts wrestler and was now accompanying Murakami as kind of, his right, his young boy, his right-hand man, Yusuda would end up holding on to Tanaka. Well, Tanaka would end up moving out of the way as Yusuda's holding on, and Matsunaga would end up spiking Yusuda accidentally. And then Matsunaga, just for the hell of it, starts stabbing Yusuda on purpose. So that would piss off Murakami that Matsunaga is purposely attacking his assistant. And so this ends up leading to Murakami would go right up to Matsunaga and punch him in the face. Well, this makes Matsunaga go crazy. He ends up just leaving the ring. He just starts roaming the crowd, chasing everyone off, as now Murakami's now in a handicap match, and Otani would end up pinning Murakami. Well, Matsunaga ends up leaving eventually, and Murakami now is pissed off, and he's looking for Matsunaga. So you see Murakami backstage with the chair just looking for Matsunaga. And eventually, he ends up finding him outside Corrigan Hall. And Murakami just jumps Matsunaga and just begins beating the crap out of him until Matsunaga would throw a fireball at Murakami to get Murakami away from him. So that's going to set up a match between Murakami and Matsunaga on November 11th in Osaka. Well, before the match, Shinjiro Otani announces that since Matsunaga, he has a reputation for attacking referees, he wants to be the referee of this match so that there will be no, weak referee that can, there could be a referee that can handle Matsunaga. So Otani's going to be the special referee of this match. And so at the start of the match, Murakami, he ends up bringing a gasoline can to the match. But a bunch of people will go right up to Murakami going, no, you can't bring that to the ring. Well, Matsunaga ends up getting in the ring, and Murakami goes right after Matsunaga and just begins punching and kicking him right away, just beating the crap out of Matsunaga. Matsunaga would end up grabbing his spike, and he would begin attacking Murakami with it, with Matsunaga cutting Murakami's chest, and then shoving Murakami into the barbed wire. Matsunaga would then end up pulling his fork out and begin cutting Murakami in the forehead with his fork. Well, eventually Matsunaga would end up going into the crowd, chasing the fans again, and then Matsunaga would end up coming back and continuing to stab Murakami in the forehead with his fork, when all of a sudden Matsunaga would go after Otani, the referee, with his fork. Well, Otani would end up slapping Matsunaga as a result, and that would lead to Murakami laying Matsunaga out with a punch, and then he takes him down and begins choking Matsunaga out. And Otani would end up rewarding the match to Murakami as he ends up just laying Matsunaga out, and you see Matsunaga's eyes like flickering. He is completely out of it as Murakami has defeated Matsunaga, and so this would be the end of Matsunaga for the time being. Matsunaga would end up coming back in 2008 to have a match against Shinjiro Otani due to the whole him attacking Otani and Otani slapping him. So they have a match, but it ends up being another 18 months or so before they get to that match.
Kanemaru would challenge for the WEW title on November 18th for lockup at Shinkiba. What took place at the show?
Kanemaru is going to take on Togi Makabe once again in a WEW title match, and Kanemaru would end up charging at Makabe on the ramp right away, and Makabe would end up nailing Kanemaru with his chain. They would end up brawling in the crowd before making it back in the ring, and then Makabe would end up setting up Kanemaru for a Death Valley driver, but Kanemaru would end up escaping from it and delivering a suplex on Makabe. Well, then Kanemaru would end up getting Makabe in the STF, and it looks like he's going to tap out, and Kanemaru is going to win the championship when Tomohiro Ishii ends up running into the ring and attacking Kanemaru. Well, Makabe would end up hitting a powerbomb and then delivering his King Kong knee drop on Kanemaru to get the win. And afterwards, Kuroda would run into the ring and attack Makabe with the chair, but he would end up getting laid out by both Tomohiro Ishii and Toru Yano, who is Makabe's tag team partner at this time period. So this is New Japan versus Apache, and once again, the New Japan guy has defeated the Apache guy. But due to interference, and now Ishii, Yano, and Makabe are going to be pretty much the top heels in the promotion, as representing New Japan going up against Apache Army.
The Apache Army then runs Shinkiba shows on November 26th. And then again on December 16th. Can you go over those shows with us?
Yeah, so the main event of the November 26th show is going to be Jun Kasai, Tomoaki Hama, and Tetsuhiro Kuroda going up against Kintaro Kanemura, Mama Sasaki, and Jintaro. And so after that lockup show, when Kuroda made the save for Kanemura, they both won a match against Makabe. They both won a challenge for Kanemura wants another shot at it because he, got screwed out of it. Kuroda wants another shot of it. Kuroda wants a shot at the WEW title and against Makabe. So this is gonna, so they're gonna square off in a 6-man against one another to set up a singles match at the next show on December 16th. Well, on November 26th, in this match, Mammoth would end up hitting a powerbomb on Jun Kasai, followed by Kanemura hitting a senton splash, and then Jintaro would hit a shooting star press. And then Jintaro would go for a sweet chin music super kick, but Jun Kasai would end up catching his leg, and then Kuroda would hit a lariat on Jintaro, and then Kasai would end up hitting a Pearl Harbor splash on Jintaro, followed by Kuroda hitting a lariat and then a German suplex for the win over Jintaro. So this is to kind of build up Kuroda for the possibility of him getting a WW title match and just, getting him at Kanemura's level for December 16th. And so on December 16th at Shinkiba, it's a singles match. The winner gets to be the number one contender for the WEW title against Makabe in January. Goito is brought back again for this show. I don't necessarily know the exact details of what Goito was doing with the company. I know, he worked backstage. I'm sure he helped book, but I know when I talked to Kanemaru, he goes, no, I was the booker. So, but Goito was definitely an employee of Apache Army. During this, on this show, Kanemaru and Kuroda, they end up fighting in the crowd. Both would end up coming back from the crowd bleeding, cut up. There's very little heat. This is nothing compared to some of the great matches they've had in the past. They're both a little bit slower here. Kanemaru would try to roll him up with a backslide, and Kuroda would turn it into a German suplex for the win. So Kuroda gets the win over Kanemaru, and Kuroda afterwards, and then pretty much the entire crowd in Shinkiba ends up coming to the ring and doing the Team No Respect dance with Kuroda in the show.
Soldier would promote his own WMF show on December 17th in his hometown of Toyohashi. Who did he end up facing on this show?
So this was Soldier's, I've talked about previously, it's usually Mr. Gannosuke promoting shows because Saku has booked a show or two, and now Soldier is going to book a show in his hometown, and this show does a pretty good number. It draws an announced crowd of 630 fans, which is probably better than any WMF show would do, in the last couple years or even going forward, because they've always would run Shinkiba for the most part. But the main event is Soldier taking on Jushin Thunder Liger. Liger would end up getting speared by Soldier right away. Soldier would end up hitting a Styles Clash on him with Liger kicking out, but eventually Liger would end up clotheslining Soldier and hitting a brainbuster for the win. I only saw clips of this match, but I actually asked Soldier what he thought of this match, and he was really disappointed. He was thinking, oh, I'm going to have this great match with Liger. He's a legend. He's this great worker. And it was just a so-so match, so he was definitely disappointed overall with it. But, as far as promoting-wise, it was... It did a good number. He drew a lot of fans for this show, but Soldier would not promote anymore afterwards.
Jun Kasai would promote his first Apache Army show on December 25th for a deathmatch tournament in Shinkiba. What happened at the show and what was noteworthy about the show?
So what was noteworthy about this show was it was kind of what Freedoms would become before there was a Freedoms. It's a deathmatch tournament with 8 guys, and all 8 guys had never actually been like a contracted FMW wrestler, which this is the first Apache Army show that this was the case. There's no Kanemaru, there's no Kuroda, there's no Mama Sasaki. So it's each match is going to be different, have a different deathmatch stipulation to it, and pretty much, this is Jun Kasai promoting a Christmas deathmatch show, which now he does every year for Freedoms. So this was the very first Jun Kasai Christmas deathmatch show, and again, the very first deathmatch tournament that Freedoms would also start doing in 2008, 2009. So the tournament's really kind of based around Jun Kasai and what he's willing to put his body through. His first match is against Man Pondo, and Kasai and Pondo, they end up fighting in the crowd. Pondo would end up getting a pair of scissors and begin cutting up Kasai. Pondo would then end up taking out a knife, and he ends up beginning to cut Kasai's eye, which is a really nasty, gross spot here. He then would take a staple gun and end up stapling Kasai's crotch and then his hand. Kasai's just getting killed here, and the crowd is so quiet. Very, just watching Kasai just get stabbed in the eye. Pondo would then end up stapling a flyer to Kasai's head, and then he keeps trying to set the flyer that's attached to Kasai's head on fire. He's trying to burn the flyer. After repeated times, Pondo just ends up screaming, "I give up." Pondo would then end up stacking up a bunch of chairs on top of other chairs, and then ends up setting the chairs on fire, and ends up suplexing Kasai onto the burning chair. Kasai would then end up coming back and throwing Pondo onto a stack of chairs, and then hitting Pondo with a stop sign and delivering a tiger suplex for the win. So it's pretty much just Kasai getting destroyed here, and having all these weapons used on him, and then at the very end, getting the win after very little offense against Pondo. This would lead to the semifinal match with Kasai going up against Ben 10, which is Jintaro's alter ego gimmick. Kasai would end up throwing the board with all the thumbtacks at Ben 10. Ben 10 would end up reversing a Tiger Driver and sending Kasai into all the thumbtacks. Kasai would fight back, and he would end up hitting a sliced bread number 2 and then rolling up Ben 10 for the win. And so that leads to the finals, Jin Kasai versus the Winger in a glass board death match. The Winger had previously defeated Hama and Takashi Sasaki to make the finals. So in this match, Kasai and Winger pretty much right away, Winger would end up drop kicking Kasai into the spider net barbed wire. Winger would then end up throwing Kasai into a barbed wire board, and then Kasai would fight back, and he would try to deliver Tiger Driver on the Winger onto the glass board, but the Winger would end up reversing it and sending Kasai into the glass board. So there's glass now all over the ring. Kasai would then end up eventually sending Winger into the other glass board. And so now both glass boards have been broken. Kasai then would take the Winger outside the ring and set him up onto 2 tables. And Kasai would then go into the crowd and begin climbing up to the rafters of Shinkiba. So Kasai is at the top of the building here when he delivers a dive from the rafters, sending the Winger through the table. This is a brutal spot because the 2 tables don't fully break. Kasai then would go backstage and bring back another glass board, and then set that up. So he's going to try and send the Winger through this glass board, but the Winger would end up getting the advantage over Kasai and then delivering a power bomb to Kasai through the 3rd glass board. So this is the 2nd glass board that Kasai is going through, and the Winger would then hit 3 senton splashes in a row to put away Kasai. So the Winger ends up getting the upset win and winning the deathmatch tournament. So this would kind of be a storyline in future years of Kasai not being able to win his own deathmatch tournament. Also, with the Winger, it would set up kind of this storyline in future years of the Winger, who, like I said, is just kind of this mid-card guy, and he's able to, when it comes to the deathmatch tournament, he's able to prevail and win the deathmatch tournament. So this would conclude 2006 with Kasai not being able to get the win after 3 brutal matches.
All right, and before we go, will you just remind everybody of all the different ways that they can find you?
You can find me at bahufmw.com or fmwwrestling.us, where I post results of freedoms or anything over the last 30 years FMW related. Same thing with the news, anything Onita, FMW, freedoms related, I'll post on my news section. I also sell DVDs of anything FMW, freedoms, Apache Army, anything, WMF. I also will sell MP4s of those shows, as well as I have the entire FMW VHS collection, and I'm willing to turn those into DVD covers and for sale as well. You can also find me on Twitter at BahuFMW, where I will post anything FMW related, any news, anything just Japanese wrestling that's interesting that I find. You can find me on Instagram at BahuFMW World, where I'll go through all my Japanese wrestling magazines and post pictures on there, anything interesting, random I find. And then you can find me on YouTube at BrettFMW. I've restarted that account back up and posted all the old FMW or all the old history of FMW podcast episodes with the clips and videos, everything that goes along with what we're talking about. And then also I've just recently started up a Facebook group called History of FMW, and I'm posting all the history of FMW videos on there as well. So there's gonna be another home for them besides YouTube. And then I'll also be posting pictures or just anything video related, FMW, with Hayabusa or any of the FMW wrestlers that, just random footage I find, I'll be posting on there as well. It's just now starting up, so just give me a little time to just kind of get everything up and running, but I hope to make this a, really cool place, again, for you, kind of a second home to find stuff that's not just on YouTube.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us for the History of FMW, episode 33, where we covered over 2006. We look forward to having you with us again next time for covering over 2007.
Can't keep them separated.